The night Lady Eliza Hawthorne confronted Duke Adrian Blackwood at the Pemberton Ball, she did something no duchess had ever dared. She called him a coward in front of 300 guests. The chandeliers trembled, the orchestra stopped mid-note, and for the first time in his life, the most powerful man in England had no answer. But that moment didn't begin with courage. It began 3 years earlier with a girl who had nothing, a marriage that was a prison, and a choice that would either destroy her or remake an empire. This is the story of a woman who entered a loveless arrangement as a bargaining chip and emerged as a force no one could ignore. A story of survival, transformation, and the dangerous game of power hidden beneath London's glittering surface. Stay with us until the end to see how Eliza Hawthorne turned humiliation into domination, invisibility into legend. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, New York, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Tokyo, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. Let's begin. The carriage smelled like damp velvet and old wood polish. Eliza sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, spine straight despite the rattling wheels beneath her. Across from her, her father stared out the window, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his weathered skin. "Remember what I told you," he said without looking at her. "Speak only when spoken to. Keep your eyes down. Do not embarrass us." Eliza nodded, though he wasn't watching. The motion felt mechanical, rehearsed. She'd been practicing compliance for weeks now, ever since the contract had been signed and her fate sealed with burgundy wax and her father's desperate signature. "This marriage saves us," her father continued, his voice rough with something between guilt and relief. "The Duke needs a wife. We need his money. It's simple." Simple. The word hung in the air like smoke. Nothing about this was simple. Nothing about being sold to a man she'd never met, a man whose reputation preceded him like winter frost, cold, unavoidable, capable of killing anything fragile. Duke Adrian Blackwood. The name alone made servants cross themselves. 32 years old, wealthy beyond comprehension, and famously brutally indifferent to anything that didn't serve his interests. He'd buried one fiancée already. Not literally, but the girl had fled to Scotland 2 weeks before their wedding, choosing scandal over marriage to him. The Ton whispered about it for months, and now Eliza was riding toward the same fate that girl had run from. "He won't hurt you," her father said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. "He's not violent, just cold, controlled. You'll give him an heir, manage his household, play your part. That's all." That's all. Eliza looked down at her hands. They were small, pale, unremarkable. Hands that had never held anything valuable. Hands that would now be expected to pour tea for duchesses, sign ledgers, hold a future heir to one of England's greatest titles. She was 20 years old, and her life was over before it had really begun. The Blackwood estate appeared through the trees like something out of a Gothic painting, all gray stone and sharp towers, windows that looked like eyes watching the approach. The ground stretched for miles, manicured within an inch of their lives, every hedge perfectly squared, every path precisely graveled. It looked like a mausoleum. The carriage stopped. A footman in immaculate livery opened the door, his face professionally blank. Eliza stepped out, her traveling dress suddenly feeling shabby despite being the finest thing she owned. The autumn wind bit at her cheeks. "Lady Eliza Hawthorne," the butler announced as she entered the main hall. His voice echoed against marble floors, up toward ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. The entrance was bigger than her family's entire manor, bigger and emptier, filled with the kind of silence that swallowed sound. "His Grace will receive you in the study," the butler continued. "This way." Her father stayed in the entrance hall. She was led alone through corridors lined with portraits of severe-looking men and women, all of them wearing the same expression, as if they'd bitten into something sour and decided to make it their permanent face. The study door was dark oak, carved with some family crest she didn't recognize. The butler knocked twice, opened it, announced her, then disappeared. Eliza stepped inside. The room was lined with books from floor to ceiling, leather-bound and undoubtedly expensive. A fire burned in the hearth despite it being only October, and behind a massive desk sat a man who barely glanced up from the document he was reading. Duke Adrian Blackwood. He was younger than she'd expected, handsome in a way that was almost cold, sharp jaw, dark hair perfectly styled, eyes the color of slate. He wore black from neck to boots, which somehow made him look both like a mourner and like death itself. He finished reading his document, signed it, set down his pen with deliberate precision. Only then did he look at her. Lady Eliza. His voice was deep, measured, completely devoid of warmth. "You're early. The roads were clear, Your Grace." He stood, moving around the desk with the kind of controlled grace that suggested he'd never made an awkward movement in his life. He was tall, taller than she'd anticipated, and the way he looked at her made her feel like a piece of furniture being evaluated for purchase, which she supposed wasn't far from the truth. "You understand the terms of our arrangement," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Grace." "You will manage the household, represent the Blackwood name in society, and provide an heir. In exchange, your family's debts will be cleared and an annual allowance provided." He paused. "We will maintain separate chambers. I do not expect or desire emotional intimacy. This is a practical arrangement, nothing more." Eliza felt something crack inside her chest, but she kept her face smooth. "I understand." "Good." He returned to his desk, already reaching for another document. "Mrs. Hendricks will show you to your rooms. Dinner is at 8. Don't be late." And just like that, she was dismissed. She stood there for a moment, waiting for something else. Some acknowledgement that they were about to be married, that their lives were about to be legally and permanently entwined. But Adrian had already returned to his papers, his attention completely withdrawn. The butler appeared at her elbow, like a ghost. "This way, my lady." Her rooms were beautiful in the way a museum was beautiful, perfectly appointed, exquisitely decorated, utterly lifeless. The bed was enormous, draped in silk that probably cost more than her father's yearly income. The windows overlooked gardens that looked like they'd been drawn with a ruler. A maid appeared, young, nervous, bobbing a curtsy so low she nearly fell over. "I'm Jenny, my lady. I'll be attending you. If you need anything—" "Thank you, Jenny," Eliza said, trying to sound warmer than she felt. "I'm sure everything will be fine." The girl looked relieved and disappeared. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, her traveling cloak still around her shoulders, and looked around at her new prison. Because that's what it was, really. A beautiful, expensive cage. She thought about the girl who'd run to Scotland. For the first time, she understood. The wedding took place 4 days later in the estate's private chapel. It was small, efficient, attended by exactly 12 people. The minimum required witnesses, her father, Adrian's solicitor, and a handful of staff members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Adrian said his vows like he was reading a contract clause. Eliza's voice shook on hers, and she hated herself for it. When the minister said, "You may kiss the bride," Adrian leaned in and pressed his lips to hers for exactly 1 second. It felt like being kissed by marble. The breakfast afterward was excruciating. Conversation was minimal. Her father looked relieved to the point of giddiness, already counting his cleared debts in his mind. Adrian spoke only to his solicitor, discussing some business matter in low tones. Eliza sat in her wedding dress, picked at food she couldn't taste, and wondered if this was what drowning felt like. Her father left that afternoon. He hugged her stiffly, whispered, "Make us proud," and climbed into his carriage without looking back. She stood on the steps and watched him disappear down the drive. When she turned around, Adrian was already gone. That night she waited in her room. The servants had prepared her, helped her into a nightgown of such fine silk it felt like water against her skin, brushed out her hair until it shone, placed her in the center of that enormous bed like an offering. She waited and waited. Around midnight, she finally understood. He wasn't coming. She got up, crossed to the connecting door between their chambers, and listened. Silence on the other side. She tried the handle. Locked. Something hot and humiliating burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let it fall. She climbed back into bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next morning, a note arrived with her breakfast tray. Adrian's handwriting was as precise as everything else about him. "Household accounts are in the study. Mrs. Hendricks will brief you on staff schedules. I'm leaving for London on business. I'll return in 3 weeks. A B. No dear wife, no signature beyond initials. Just instructions and an absence." Eliza set the note down and looked at Jenny, who was trying very hard to pretend she hadn't seen it. "Jenny," Eliza said carefully, "how long has the Duke lived here?" Since he inherited my lady. 8 years now. And in those 8 years, has he ever been— She searched for the right word. Warm with anyone? Jenny's face went carefully blank. His grace is very private, my lady. Which was servant speak for no, never, and don't ask again. Eliza nodded slowly. I see. Thank you, Jenny. When the girl left, Eliza sat in the window seat and looked out at those perfectly manicured gardens. Somewhere in the estate, servants were working. Somewhere in London, Adrian was doing whatever cold, important things dukes did. And here she was, a 20-year-old bride in a house the size of a village, utterly and completely alone. She could feel it then, the weight of invisibility settling over her like dust. This was her life now, this silence, this absence, this beautiful, suffocating nothing. The old Eliza, the girl who dreamed of love, of partnership, of being seen, would have curled up and wept. But something else stirred in her chest, something harder. If she was going to be invisible, she'd be invisible on her own terms. If she was going to survive this marriage, she'd have to become someone Adrian couldn't ignore. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked downstairs to find Mrs. Hendricks. I'd like to see the household accounts, she told the housekeeper. All of them. And I want to meet with every head of staff today. Mrs. Hendricks blinked. My lady, perhaps you'd like to rest first. Today, Eliza repeated. Please. The housekeeper hesitated, then nodded slowly. As you wish, my lady. Eliza spent the next 6 hours in the study, poring over ledgers and budgets and staff rosters. What she found made her blood run cold. The Blackwood estate was hemorrhaging money, not catastrophically, Adrian was far too wealthy for that, but carelessly. Expenses were bloated, suppliers were overcharging, staff positions overlapped inefficiently. The household ran like a machine designed by someone who'd never bothered to check if all the gears actually worked together. And underneath it all, she found something worse. The servants were miserable. Wages were paid late. Quarters were overcrowded. Requests for basic supplies were routinely denied while thousands were spent on imported marble for rooms no one used. It was a system designed by someone who saw people as functions, not humans. Adrian's touch was everywhere. That night, Eliza sat at the dinner table alone. The dining room could seat 40, and she occupied one end of it like a single chess piece on an empty board. Footmen served her courses she didn't want, poured wine she didn't drink. When she was finally alone, she walked through the house. Miles of corridor, dozens of rooms, all of them perfect and cold and lifeless. She passed a gallery lined with paintings, stern Blackwood ancestors, frozen in oil and judgment. At the very end hung something different, a landscape, dark and stormy, painted with violent brushstrokes that looked angry. No signature, no date. She stood in front of it for a long time, wondering who had painted something so raw in a house so controlled. 3 weeks passed. Adrian returned from London exactly when he'd said he would, arriving after dinner, going straight to his study. Eliza heard his footsteps in the corridor outside her room around midnight. She held her breath, waiting. The footsteps paused at her door, then moved on. The next morning, she found him in the breakfast room reading correspondence. He glanced up when she entered, nodded once, and returned to his letters. How was London? She asked, taking her seat. Productive. I've made some changes to the household budget. I'd like to discuss them with you. Changes? Now he looked at her, one eyebrow slightly raised. What kind of changes? Efficiency improvements. I've renegotiated supplier contracts and restructured staff schedules. We'll save approximately £3,000 annually without any reduction in service. Adrian set down his letter. You've been here less than a month. 3 weeks and 4 days, Eliza corrected. Long enough to see where money was being wasted. Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Irritation? It was gone before she could name it. Mrs. Hendricks approved these changes? He asked. Mrs. Hendricks implemented them. The staff seem relieved. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Eliza held his gaze, pulse hammering but face steady. Finally, he nodded once. Fine. Send me the revised budget. It's already on your desk. The corner of his mouth might have twitched, or she might have imagined it. He stood, gathering his papers. I'm leaving for the northern estates tomorrow. I'll be gone 2 months. 2 months. The words landed like stones. Of course, Eliza said. Safe travels. He paused at the door, not quite looking at her. The changes you made. They're sound. Then he was gone. Eliza sat alone in the breakfast room, her tea growing cold, and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. She'd been seen, just for a moment, but she'd been seen, and she was going to make sure it happened again. Over the next 2 months, Eliza transformed the estate from within. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for approval. She simply acted. She moved through the servants' quarters and saw the cramped conditions, the leaking roofs, the broken windows. Within a week, repairs began. Within 2 weeks, every servant had a decent bed and adequate space. She discovered that the elderly groundskeeper, Thomas, had an injured knee that hadn't been treated. She brought in a doctor from the village, paid from her own allowance. She learned that 3 kitchen maids were working 18-hour days because there weren't enough staff. She hired 2 more. Word spread quickly among the servants. The new duchess was different. Jenny mentioned it one morning while helping Eliza dress. They're saying you're kind, my lady. Eliza looked at the girl's reflection in the mirror. I'm practical, Jenny. Unhappy servants work poorly. Happy servants work well. It's not kindness. It's sense. But they both knew she was lying. By the time Adrian returned from the north, the entire atmosphere of the house had shifted. The servants moved with more purpose, smiled more readily. The estate felt, for the first time in years, alive. Adrian noticed immediately. She saw it in the way he paused in doorways, looking around as if seeing rooms for the first time. The way his eyes followed her when she moved through the house, giving quiet instructions, checking on tasks. But he said nothing. One evening, about a week after his return, Eliza was in the library, her favorite room filled with books Adrian clearly never read, when he appeared in the doorway. May I come in? He asked. She looked up, startled. He'd never asked permission before. It's your house. It's your library, apparently. He moved to the brandy decanter, poured himself 2 fingers. The staff seemed different. They're being treated like humans. It has that effect. Adrian turned, studying her over the rim of his glass. You disapprove of how I ran things. I disapprove of inefficiency, Eliza said carefully. Mistreated staff steal, gossip, and work poorly. Respected staff become loyal. It's better for everyone. Practical, he said, echoing her words to Jenny. Always. He moved closer, and Eliza fought the urge to stand. He'd barely spoken to her in the 3 months they'd been married, and now he was here, in her space, looking at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. You're not what I expected, he said finally. What did you expect? Someone quieter, more compliant. I am compliant, Eliza said. I've done everything you asked, managed your household, represented your name. I simply did it well. His expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering across those cold features. Yes, you did. They stood there in silence, the fire crackling, the library feeling smaller with both of them in it. Then Adrian set down his glass. I'm hosting a gathering next month. Small, 30 guests. You'll need to act as hostess. Of course. And after that, we'll go to London for the season. You'll need a new wardrobe. He paused. I've arranged for a modiste to visit next week. Liza's pulse quickened. London, society, the ton, everything she'd been waiting for. Thank you, she managed. Adrian nodded once and left. Eliza sank back into her chair, hands trembling slightly. It was starting. Whatever game this was, whatever survival strategy she was building, it was starting. The gathering was torture. Eliza spent 3 weeks preparing, learning about each guest, their interests, their allegiances, their gossip value. She oversaw every detail: menus, seating arrangements, entertainment, flowers. When the guests arrived, she was perfect, poised, elegant, conversational without being familiar. She remembered names, asked thoughtful questions, laughed at appropriate moments. She watched Adrian watch her. He stood across the drawing room surrounded by important men discussing important things, and his eyes kept drifting to where she sat, effortlessly charming a circle of wives. But when the last guest departed and they were alone, he simply said, "Well done," and retired to his study. That night, Eliza stood at her window and looked out at the dark grounds. She'd performed perfectly. She'd done exactly what was expected, and she'd felt nothing, no connection, no warmth, just the cold satisfaction of a job executed correctly. Was this it? Was this her life? An endless series of perfect performances for a man who saw her as a well-functioning tool. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and felt something fierce rise in her chest. No. She'd saved this household. She'd earned respect from the servants. She'd proven herself capable. But Adrian still treated her like an arrangement, a contract, a necessary inconvenience. If she was going to change that, if she was going to become something more than a duchess-shaped shadow in his house, she'd need to do something bigger. London. That was her answer. London, where reputation was currency and power came from being impossible to ignore. If Adrian wouldn't see her here, in the quiet privacy of his estate, then she'd make all of England see her, and he'd have no choice but to notice. The modiste arrived the following week with trunks full of fabrics and fashion plates. Eliza studied them carefully, rejecting anything too subdued, too forgettable. "I want to look like a duchess," she told the woman, "not like I'm apologizing for being one." The modiste smiled. "Yes, my lady." 2 months later, trunks packed and plans made, Eliza climbed into the carriage that would take them to London. Adrian was already inside, reading correspondence as always. As they rolled down the drive, leaving the estate behind, Eliza looked out at the passing countryside and felt something like hope spark in her chest. She'd survived the first test, the isolation, the rejection, the invisibility. Now came the second, society. And this time she wasn't going to fade quietly into the background. This time she was going to make them remember her name. London hit Eliza like a wall of noise and color and judgment. The Blackwood townhouse sat in Mayfair, 4 stories of pristine white stone that screamed old money. Inside it was just as sterile as the estate, more marble, more silence, more rooms that felt like they'd never been lived in. Adrian disappeared within an hour of their arrival. Something about Parliament. Eliza stood in the entrance hall, surrounded by luggage, and felt the familiar weight of abandonment settle over her shoulders. "My lady?" It was Davis, the London butler, older than Mrs. Hendricks, with a face like weathered leather. "Shall I show you to your chambers?" "Yes, thank you." Her rooms overlooked the square. Through the windows she could see London society moving like pieces on a chessboard, carriages rolling past, ladies in walking dresses, gentlemen in tailcoats. Somewhere out there was the world she needed to conquer. She just had no idea how. That night, alone in the dining room again, Eliza picked at her food and tried not to think about how quiet everything was. In the estate, she'd had purpose. Servants to help, systems to fix, problems to solve. Here, she was just another duchess in a city full of them. Invisible again. The next morning, calling cards started arriving. Not many, just enough to be polite. Lady Pemberton. The Dowager Duchess of Somerset. Mrs. Caroline Ashford. Names Eliza recognized from Adrian's guest list. She studied each card like a battle plan. These women were her entry point. Impress them, and doors would open. Fail, and she'd be dismissed as another country mouse playing duchess. Her first call was to Lady Pemberton, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and sharper wit. Eliza wore her most elegant afternoon dress. Deep blue silk that the modiste had insisted made her look older, more sophisticated. Lady Pemberton's drawing room was packed with women, all of them dripping with jewels and judgment. Conversation stopped when Eliza was announced. "Duchess Blackwood," Lady Pemberton said, rising. "How delightful. We've been so curious about you." Curious? The word that meant we've been gossiping, and now we want to see if you're worth our time. Eliza smiled, cool and composed. "Thank you for receiving me, Lady Pemberton. Your home is lovely." She was offered tea, introduced to a dozen names she'd memorized beforehand. The conversation was all surface, weather, fashion, the upcoming season. But underneath, Eliza could feel them measuring her, weighing her. "Tell us, Duchess," said a woman whose name Eliza couldn't quite recall. "How are you finding London? It must be quite different from Blackwood Estate." "Different," Eliza agreed, "but not unwelcome. I've always believed change keeps one sharp." A few polite laughs. Lady Pemberton tilted her head. "And the Duke? Will he be joining society this season?" There it was, the real question. Where's your husband, and why isn't he here with you? His Grace has parliamentary duties, Eliza said smoothly, but he's encouraged me to represent the family. He trusts my judgment. It was a lie. Adrian hadn't said a word about what he expected from her in London, but these women didn't need to know that. How modern, someone murmured. The call lasted exactly 15 minutes, the minimum required by etiquette. When Eliza left, she felt like she'd just survived a firing squad. 3 more calls that week. 3 more performances. By the end of it, Eliza was exhausted and no closer to making any real connections. The women were polite but distant, welcoming but cold. She was being tolerated, not accepted. "You're trying too hard," Adrian said one evening. Eliza looked up from her book. He was standing in the doorway of the drawing room, the first time he'd sought her out in days. "Excuse me?" "The ton." He moved into the room, hands in his pockets. "You're performing for them. They can smell it." Heat flooded Eliza's cheeks. "I'm doing exactly what you asked, representing your name. You're acting like you need their approval." Adrian stopped in front of her chair, looking down. "You're a duchess. You don't need anything from them. They need things from you. That's easy for you to say. You were born into this. And you married into it. Same result." He paused. "Stop asking for permission to exist in their world. Just exist." Then he left. Eliza sat there, book forgotten, his words turning over in her mind. Stop asking for permission. The next invitation that arrived was for a musicale at the Ashford residence. Small, intimate, only 30 guests. Exactly the kind of event where reputations were made or broken. Eliza dressed differently this time, not trying to impress. Just elegant, simple. A green silk gown that fit perfectly, hair arranged in a style that looked effortless but had taken Jenny an hour to achieve. When she arrived, Mrs. Ashford greeted her warmly. "Duchess Blackwood, I'm so pleased you could come. Let me introduce you to—" "Actually," Eliza interrupted gently, "I was hoping to hear the music first. I'm told your pianist is exceptional." Mrs. Ashford blinked, then smiled. "Of course. Please sit wherever you'd like." Eliza chose a seat near the back and simply listened. She didn't circulate, didn't perform, just sat, apparently absorbed in the music, while around her the ton whispered and wondered. Who is she? Why isn't she working the room? Does she think she's too good for us? After the performance, several women approached her, not because they had to, but because they were curious. "You're a music lover, Duchess?" asked Lady Helena Crane, a woman Eliza knew was married to a prominent banker. "I appreciate skill," Eliza said. "The pianist has remarkable technique." "You play yourself?" "Adequately, nothing compared to tonight's performance." Lady Helena smiled. "Modest, how refreshing." She paused. "There's a charity luncheon next week for the Foundling Hospital. We'd love your support." Just like that, a door opened. Over the next 3 weeks, Eliza attended 6 events. She didn't try to charm everyone. She picked her moments, listened more than she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, remembered details about people's children, their interests, their concerns. And slowly, imperceptibly, the tide began to turn. Women started seeking her out, not because she was a duchess, London was full of those, but because she was interesting, intelligent, different. "You're not like the others," Lady Helena said one afternoon over tea. "Just the 2 of them, no performance required. Most women in your position are either desperate for approval or completely disdainful. You're neither." "I'm practical," Eliza said. "Always have been." "Practical." Helena laughed. "Is that what you call it? I'd call it strategic." Eliza met her eyes. "Can it be both?" Helena raised her teacup in a mock toast. "I think we're going to be friends, Duchess." It was the first real friendship Eliza had made since her marriage. It felt like water in a desert. But not everything was going smoothly. Adrian's behavior was becoming strange. He still maintained his distance, separate chambers, minimal conversation, but Eliza started noticing things. He was watching her. Not obviously, but she'd turn at a party and catch him across the room, eyes fixed on her before he'd look away. She'd leave for a morning call and see him at the window of his study, tracking her carriage. At first she thought she was imagining it. Then it started happening too often to be coincidence. One night she confronted him, sort of. "Adrian," she said, catching him in the hallway after a dinner party. "May I ask you something?" He stopped, turned. "What? Am I doing something wrong?" His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "You keep watching me. At events. I thought perhaps I was embarrassing you somehow." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? "You're not embarrassing me. Then why—" "You're different than I expected," he said, echoing his words from months ago. "That's all." "Different how?" He looked at her for a long moment, and Eliza had the sudden, unsettling sensation of being truly seen, not evaluated, not judged, just seen. "I expected you to fail," he said finally. "I expected London to eat you alive. Instead, you're thriving." It wasn't quite a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either. "I'm a quick learner," Eliza said. "Clearly." He started to move past her, then paused. "That dress, the green one you wore to the Ashford Musicale. It suits you." Then he was gone, leaving Eliza standing in the hallway, heart pounding, wondering what the hell that meant. The season rolled on. Eliza's reputation grew. She became known as intelligent, elegant, surprisingly approachable for a duchess. Invitations poured in. Her calling hours were always full. And then the whispers started. She first heard them at Lady Pemberton's card party. Two women in the corner, voices low but not quite low enough. "Have you seen her with the Duke?" "Never together. It's odd, isn't it?" "I heard the marriage was arranged, no love match." "Well, obviously, but still, they barely speak to each other." Eliza's cards blurred in front of her. She played her hand automatically, maintaining her smile while her mind raced. Of course people had noticed. How could they not? Adrian treated her like a stranger in public. They arrived at events separately, left separately, barely acknowledged each other. She'd been so focused on building her own reputation that she hadn't considered what people might think about her marriage. That night, she waited up for Adrian. When she heard his footsteps in the hall around midnight, she opened her door. "We need to talk," she said. He stopped, looking surprised to see her still awake. "It's late." "People are talking about us." "People always talk." "About our marriage, Adrian. About how we never speak, never touch. They're starting to question—" She stopped, not quite sure how to finish that sentence. Adrian's expression went cold. "Let them question." "That's easy for you to say. You're the Duke. I'm the one they'll—" "The one they'll what? Pity?" He stepped closer, and there was something sharp in his eyes. "Is that what this is about? You're embarrassed?" "I'm worried," Eliza shot back. "Your reputation can survive scandal. Mine can't. If they decide I'm a failure as a wife, everything I've built here crumbles." "Then perhaps you should have thought of that before." "Before what? Before I tried to make the best of a loveless arrangement?" Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. "Before I tried to become something more than furniture in your life?" Adrian went very still. "Is that what you think you are?" "What else would I think?" The words came out harder than she intended. "You leave notes instead of having conversations. You lock the door between our chambers on our wedding night. You barely acknowledge my existence unless I've done something to inconvenience you." "That's not—" He stopped, jaw working. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" They stared at each other in the dim hallway, years of silence and distance suddenly visible between them. "I don't know how to do this," Adrian said finally, quietly. Eliza blinked. "Do what?" "This. Marriage. Partnership. I don't—" He looked away, something like frustration crossing his face. "I don't know how to be what you need." It was the first vulnerable thing she'd ever heard him say. "I need you to try," Eliza said. "In public, at least. I need people to believe this marriage is real." Adrian looked back at her, and for a moment she thought he might refuse. Then he nodded once. "Fine. What do you suggest?" "Tomorrow. Lady Somerset's garden party. Arrive with me. Stay with me. Act like you can tolerate my company." His mouth twitched. "I can tolerate your company." "You have a strange way of showing it, clearly." He stepped back. "Tomorrow, then. Good night, Eliza." It was the first time he'd used her name without the lady in front of it. She watched him walk away and felt something dangerous shift in her chest. Lady Somerset's garden party was exactly as insufferable as Eliza had anticipated. 300 guests crammed into an overly manicured garden, pretending to enjoy tepid champagne and mediocre canapes. But Adrian was at her side. He'd arrived at the townhouse exactly when he said he would, offered his arm without comment, and accompanied her to the party like a proper husband. People noticed immediately. Eliza could feel the shift in attention, the way eyes tracked them through the crowd. Adrian, to his credit, played the part perfectly. He stayed close, fetched her drinks, engaged in conversation when required. "You're good at this," she murmured during a lull. "At what? Pretending?" He looked down at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Who says I'm pretending?" Before she could respond, Lady Pemberton appeared. "Duke, Duchess, how lovely to see you both, together for once." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Eliza felt him tense slightly. "We've both been busy, Lady Pemberton." Of course. Though I must say, it's nice to see you taking an interest in your wife's social success." She smiled at Eliza. "The Duchess has been quite the sensation this season." "I'm aware," Adrian said. "Are you?" Lady Pemberton's eyes gleamed with barely concealed curiosity. "You're not often at these events." "I'm here now." It was said mildly, but there was steel underneath. Lady Pemberton recognized a warning when she heard one. She made her excuses and drifted away. "That woman is a menace," Adrian muttered. "That woman controls half the social invitations in London," Eliza corrected. "Be nice." "I'm always nice." Eliza laughed before she could stop herself. Actually laughed. Adrian looked at her, surprised. "What?" "Nothing. You're just... Never mind." They made their way through the party, and Eliza had to admit it felt different having him there. Better. Like she wasn't performing alone on a stage but had a partner in the act, even if it was just an act. Then, near the end of the afternoon, everything changed. They were standing near the refreshment table when a woman approached. Young, beautiful, dressed in a gown that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. "Adrian," she said, just his name. Familiar. Intimate. Adrian went rigid. "Lady Victoria." Lady Victoria Hartley. Eliza recognized the name now. Daughter of an earl, engaged to some minor lord. And from the way she was looking at Adrian, there was history there. "It's been a long time," Victoria continued, ignoring Eliza completely. "I heard you'd married. How unexpected." "May I introduce my wife?" Adrian said, his voice carefully neutral. "Duchess Eliza Blackwood. Eliza, this is Lady Victoria Hartley." Victoria's eyes flicked to Eliza, dismissive. "Charmed." Then back to Adrian. "I'd hoped we might speak. Privately." "I don't think..." "Please, just a moment." Adrian looked at Eliza. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to refuse warring with something else, some obligation or history she didn't understand. "Go," Eliza said quietly. "I'll be fine." He hesitated, then nodded and followed Victoria toward a quieter corner of the garden. Eliza stood there, champagne in hand, trying not to look like her husband had just abandoned her for a beautiful woman at a party full of gossiping aristocrats. "That's Victoria Hartley," a voice said beside her. Eliza turned. Lady Helena had materialized at her elbow. "I gathered," Eliza said, "she and the Duke were close once, very close, before your marriage." Helena paused. "The rumor is he wanted to marry her, but her family refused. Wrong political connections, apparently." Something cold settled in Eliza's stomach. "I see." "I'm sure it's nothing," Helena said, but her eyes were worried. "Just old history." Old history that had Victoria touching Adrian's arm, leaning close, speaking urgently about something that had his full attention. Eliza looked away. "I'm sure you're right." But she wasn't sure. Not at all. Adrian returned 15 minutes later, his expression carefully blank. "Ready to leave?" "Yes." They made their excuses and left. The carriage ride home was silent. Eliza stared out the window. Adrian stared at nothing, and between them the air felt heavy with things unsaid. When they reached this townhouse, Eliza went straight upstairs. She'd nearly reached her room when Adrian's voice stopped her. "It's not what you think." She turned. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at her. "I don't know what I think," Eliza said honestly. "You won't tell me anything. Victoria and I have history. I won't lie about that. But it's over. Has been for years." "Does she know that?" Adrian climbed the stairs until he was level with her. "It doesn't matter what she knows. I'm married to you." "An arrangement," Eliza reminded him. "Your words, not mine." "Yes, an arrangement." Something flickered in his eyes. "But that doesn't mean I'm unfaithful, Eliza. I made vows. I keep them." She wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she couldn't quite afford. "Fine," she said. "Thank you for today, for the party." Eliza, "Good night, Adrian." She went into her room and closed the door. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria Hartley appeared everywhere. At the theater, sitting 3 boxes away. At Lady Crane's luncheon, positioned directly across from Eliza. At a gallery opening, somehow always in Adrian's line of sight. And the whispers grew louder. "Did you see them at the theater?" She's still in love with him, obviously. "I heard they meet secretly." Eliza gritted her teeth and maintained her composure. She smiled at parties, made small talk, pretended her marriage wasn't becoming London's favorite source of gossip, but inside, she was burning. Helena pulled her aside at yet another insufferable event. "You need to address this." "Address what?" "Don't play coy. The Victoria situation. People are starting to talk." "Let them talk." "Eliza." Helena's voice was gentle but firm. "Your reputation is built on being unshakable. If they think you're being humiliated, everything you've accomplished this season means nothing." "What do you suggest I do? Challenge her to a duel?" "No. But you need to remind London who you are. The Duke's wife. Not some girl who can be displaced by old flames and pretty faces." Eliza knew Helena was right, but she didn't know how to fight an enemy who might not even be an enemy. Victoria hadn't done anything overtly inappropriate. She was just present. A beautiful ghost haunting the edges of Eliza's marriage. The breaking point came at the Pemberton Ball. It was the event of the season. 500 guests, an orchestra, enough champagne to float a ship. Eliza wore her most stunning gown, deep burgundy silk with black lace. She looked like a duchess. Felt like one. Until she saw Victoria dancing with Adrian, they moved together perfectly, gracefully, like they'd done it 100 times before. Adrian was smiling, actually smiling at something Victoria said. The expression transformed his face, made him look younger, less controlled. Eliza had never seen him look at her like that. Something inside her cracked. She set down her champagne and walked straight across the ballroom floor. People moved aside, sensing drama. When the dance ended, Eliza stepped directly between Adrian and Victoria. "May I cut in?" she said sweetly. Victoria's eyes went cold. I wasn't asking you." Eliza looked at Adrian. "Dance with your wife." For a moment, nobody moved. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Then Adrian took Eliza's hand and led her onto the floor. The music swelled. They began to dance. And Eliza, who'd been holding everything in for weeks, finally broke. "What is she to you?" she demanded, voice low. "Eliza, not here." "Yes, here. Because I'm tired of pretending, tired of being humiliated, tired of wondering if my husband is in love with someone else." Adrian's grip on her waist tightened. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Because right now it looks like you married me while still pining for a woman you couldn't have." They spun across the floor, and Eliza could feel eyes on them, could practically hear the gossip spreading like wildfire. "Victoria wanted to talk," Adrian said, his voice tight. "About old times. That's all." "That's all?" "Adrian, she's been everywhere for weeks, watching you, watching us." "I can't control what she does." "But you can control what you do. And you keep entertaining her, talking to her, dancing with her." Eliza's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" Adrian's jaw clenched. "This is about your reputation." "This is about respect," Eliza hissed. "I've done everything you asked, been the perfect duchess, built your standing in society. and you repay me by making me look like a fool. I've never... Yes, you have. Every time you give her attention, every time you let her pretend she still has a claim on you. The music ended. They stood there in the middle of the floor, breathing hard, staring at each other while 500 people watched. You're making a scene, Adrian said quietly. Good. Maybe it's time. She pulled away, turned, and walked straight out of the ballroom. Behind her, she could hear the explosion of whispers, feel the weight of judgment and speculation. She'd just committed social suicide, and she didn't even care. She made it to the gardens before the tears came. Eliza pressed her back against cold stone, gulping air that tasted like roses and humiliation. The music from the ballroom drifted through the windows, waltz after waltz, the party continuing as if she hadn't just destroyed herself in front of everyone who mattered. Stupid, she whispered. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Footsteps on gravel. She straightened, swiping at her eyes, expecting Adrian or maybe Helena come to salvage what was left of the wreckage. Instead, Victoria Hartley stepped into the lamplight. That was quite a performance, Victoria said. Her voice was smooth, amused. Very dramatic. Eliza's hands clenched. What do you want? To talk, woman to woman. Victoria moved closer, and in the dim light she looked almost sympathetic. Almost. You're wondering about Adrian and me. I can see it eating at you. I'm not discussing my husband with you. No? Even though I could tell you things he'll never admit? Victoria tilted her head. Did he tell you why we ended? Why his family approved of you but never me? Eliza said nothing, waited. Because I had opinions, Victoria continued. Because I wouldn't be molded into his perfect duchess. Because I wanted a real marriage, not a business arrangement. She paused. Sound familiar? You don't know anything about my marriage, don't I? I've watched you, Duchess. Watched you try so hard to be everything he wants. It's exhausting, isn't it? Being invisible while pretending you're not? The words hit too close. Eliza felt something hot and ugly rise in her throat. If you're trying to make me feel sorry for you, I'm trying to warn you. Victoria's expression shifted, something harder underneath the sympathy. Adrian doesn't love. He controls. He owns. I escaped that fate. You didn't. She turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Duchess, the whole ballroom is talking about your little scene. By tomorrow, you'll be a laughingstock. I'd start planning your retreat to the country. Then she was gone, leaving Eliza alone with the roses and the truth. She didn't go back inside. She walked to the front of the house, found their carriage, and told the driver to take her home. Let Adrian find his own way back. The townhouse was dark when she arrived. She went straight to her room, let Jenny help her undress in silence, then dismissed the girl and sat at her window. London stretched out below, thousands of windows lit like cold stars. Somewhere out there, 500 people were dissecting what had happened, laughing about the desperate Duchess who'd made a fool of herself over a husband who clearly didn't want her. Victoria was right. By morning, Eliza's reputation would be in ruins. Everything she'd built, the respect, the friendships, the power, gone because she'd finally cracked under pressure. She heard Adrian return around 2 a.m. His footsteps paused outside her door. For a long moment, silence. Then the footsteps moved on. Eliza closed her eyes and tried not to feel anything at all. Morning brought consequences. No calling cards arrived. No invitations. By noon, it was clear. London society had made its verdict. The desperate Duchess who'd caused a scene at the Pemberton ball was no longer welcome. Helena was the only one who came. She arrived around 3, brushed past the butler, and marched straight into Eliza's sitting room. Tell me what happened, she demanded. The real story, not the gossip. Eliza stared at her tea. I confronted Adrian about Victoria, in the middle of a dance, in front of everyone. Why? Because I was tired of being humiliated, tired of pretending everything was fine when my husband is clearly still attached to another woman. Helena sat down heavily. You think he's in love with her? Aren't you going to tell me I'm wrong? I don't know if you're wrong. Helena's honesty was brutal. But I know you just committed social murder based on an assumption. That's not like you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. Or maybe you're more human than you let yourself be. Helena leaned forward. Listen to me. You have two choices. You can run back to the estate, hide, let London forget you, or you can fight. Fight how? No one will receive me now. Then make them receive you. Remind them who you are. I'm nobody, Eliza said quietly. A baron's daughter who married up. They've always known it. Last night just confirmed it. That's self-pity talking. The woman who restructured the Blackwood estate, who charmed half of London, who stood up to her husband in front of the entire ton, that woman is not nobody. Helena's voice turned sharp. But she does need to decide who she's going to be. The duchess who breaks, or the one who breaks everyone else? After Helena left, Eliza sat in silence for hours. She thought about Victoria's words, about Adrian's distance, about the girl she'd been when she arrived at the estate, frightened, small, desperate to survive. She wasn't that girl anymore. She'd learned to navigate servants and society and systems that were designed to crush her. She'd built something from nothing, earned respect in a world that gave her none by default. And one bad night was going to erase all of that? No. Hell no. Eliza stood, rang for Jenny, and started planning. The next morning, she sent invitations to 30 women. Not the most powerful. Those doors were closed now. But the ones who'd always been on the fringes. The second daughters, the country wives, the women who'd never quite fit into the rigid structure of London society. Tea at the Blackwood townhouse. 4 o'clock. Please come. 17 accepted. Eliza spent the day preparing. She had the drawing room rearranged, less formal, more intimate. Ordered food that was delicious rather than fashionable. Sent Adrian a note saying the drawing room was occupied and he should make himself scarce. He didn't respond, but he didn't appear either. At 4 o'clock, the women arrived. They looked curious, cautious, unsure why the scandalous duchess had invited them. Eliza greeted each one personally, remembered their names, their interests, details from previous conversations. Made them feel seen. When everyone was settled, she stood. Thank you for coming, she said. I know what you've heard about the ball, about my behavior. Uncomfortable shifting. Several women looked at their tea. And I'm not going to apologize for it, Eliza continued, because I'm done apologizing for taking up space, for having opinions, for refusing to be invisible. Now they looked up, interested. I married the Duke knowing it wasn't a love match. I came to London knowing I'd be judged. And I've spent months being perfect, saying the right things, wearing the right clothes, being exactly what everyone expected. She paused. And it still wasn't enough. Because nothing is ever enough when you're a woman trying to survive in a world that wants you silent. Nods now. Recognition. So I'm done being perfect. I'm done performing. And if that makes me scandalous, so be it. Eliza met their eyes. But I thought perhaps some of you might feel the same way. Tired of pretending. Tired of being diminished. If I'm wrong, you can leave. No judgment. Nobody moved. If I'm right, Eliza continued, then maybe we can build something different. Not the London society that excludes and judges and tears down, but something else. A group of women who actually support each other. A woman named Sarah spoke up. What are you proposing? Honestly, I'm not sure yet, but I know I'm tired of fighting alone, and I suspect I'm not the only one. Slowly, carefully, conversation began. The women shared stories of being dismissed, overlooked, mocked, of struggling to fit into a society that had rigid expectations and no forgiveness. By the time they left, 3 hours later, something had shifted. Eliza had found her people. Not the most powerful women in London, but real ones. And that, she was learning, mattered more. Adrian appeared that evening while she was reviewing notes from the tea. I heard you had guests, he said from the doorway. Yes. The ones no one else invites. The ones with actual personalities. Yes. Eliza didn't look up from her notes. Adrian moved into the room. What are you doing, Eliza? What you told me to do. Existing without asking permission. By declaring war on London society? By building something better. Now she looked at him. You were right. I was performing for approval. Now I'm done performing. He studied her for a long moment. They'll come after you harder now. Let them. Eliza, unless you're here to actually talk to me, really talk, not issue warnings or give advice, I'd appreciate being left alone. Adrian's jaw tightened. Fine. He left, but something in his expression stayed with her, something that might have been respect, or worry, or both. Over the next week, Eliza's small group grew. The women started calling themselves the Fringe Society, half joke, half defiance. They met twice more, conversations ranging from charity work to politics to the absurd restrictions they all lived under. And slowly, word spread. Some of London's elite found it amusing, some found it threatening, but everyone was talking about it, about the Duchess who'd stopped caring what they thought and built her own circle instead. Then the letters started arriving. The first one was slipped under her door. No signature. Your husband keeps secrets. Ask him about his midnight meetings. Eliza stared at it, pulse hammering. Midnight meetings. With whom? Victoria? She wanted to dismiss it as gossip, but something cold settled in her stomach. The second letter arrived 3 days later. The Duke leaves the house at strange hours. Where does he go? Who does he see? A wife should know. Eliza confronted Adrian that night, found him in his study, surrounded by papers. Are you having an affair? She asked bluntly. He looked up, genuinely startled. What? I've received letters suggesting you're meeting someone, secretly. Adrian's expression went carefully blank. And you believe anonymous letters? I believe what I see, and I see a husband who disappears at odd hours, who keeps his wife at arm's length, who has a former lover circling like a vulture. Eliza, just tell me the truth. If you're in love with Victoria, if you want to end this marriage, tell me. I can survive humiliation, but I can't survive being lied to. Adrian stood, moved around the desk. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. I am not having an affair. With Victoria or anyone else. Then where do you go? That's complicated. Try me. He looked at her for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. I can't explain. Not yet. Why not? Because it's dangerous. And the less you know, the safer you are. Eliza laughed bitterly. Dangerous? What could possibly be dangerous about a duke's business dealings? You'd be surprised. Then surprise me. Tell me the truth. I can't. Can't or won't. Eliza, get out! The words came out flat, final. If you won't trust me with the truth, then we have nothing left to discuss. Adrian's expression hardened. Fine. He left. And Eliza sat in his study, surrounded by his secrets, feeling like she was drowning. The third letter arrived the next morning. If you want the truth, go to the Silver Swan Tavern tonight. 11 o'clock. Come alone. It was obviously a trap, obviously dangerous. Any sensible person would burn the letter and forget about it. Eliza dressed in her plainest cloak and told the driver to take her to the docks. The Silver Swan sat in one of London's rougher neighborhoods, the kind where duchesses definitely didn't venture, especially not alone at night. Eliza pulled her hood low and pushed through the door. Inside, smoke and noise and the smell of unwashed bodies. Men turned to look at her, evaluating. She kept her chin up and scanned the room. In the corner, a figure gestured. Eliza made her way over, heart pounding. The man who waited was middle-aged, nondescript, with the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. Duchess Blackwood, thank you for coming. Who are you? Someone who knows what your husband is doing and thinks you deserve to know too. He pushed a folder across the table. Take it. Read it. Decide what you want to do. What is this? Insurance, leverage, the truth. He stood. Your husband is not what he seems. Neither is his relationship with Lady Victoria. Read the files. Then decide if you want to keep playing the dutiful wife. He disappeared into the crowd before Eliza could respond. She sat there, the folder heavy in her hands, knowing she was about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. Then she opened it. The first document was a letter, Adrian's handwriting, addressed to someone named M. The contents made no sense, references to shipments, routes, coded phrases. The second was a map. London docks, locations marked in red. The third was a list of names. Half of them she recognized, members of parliament, naval officers, wealthy merchants. And at the bottom, circled twice, Lady Victoria Hartley. Eliza's hand started shaking. The fourth document was a report, written in someone else's hand but mentioning Adrian repeatedly. Words jumped out at her: surveillance, interception, foreign assets, national security. The room spun. Eliza gripped the table, trying to understand what she was reading. Adrian wasn't having an affair. He was working for someone, some organization involved in espionage or intelligence or something far beyond society balls and parliamentary debates. And Victoria was part of it. The meetings, the secrecy, the way they danced together at the ball. It wasn't romance. It was business. But why hadn't he told her? Why let her believe the worst? The less you know, the safer you are. Eliza gathered the papers, shoved them back in the folder, and stood. The walk back to her carriage felt like moving through water. Her mind raced, trying to piece together implications and possibilities. When she reached the townhouse, all the lights were blazing. The door flew open before she could reach it. Adrian stood there, face white with fury. "Where the hell have you been?" "Out." "Out? It's past midnight. You went to the docks alone. How did you know I went to the docks?" "I'd have you followed, Eliza, for your safety. And you just went to one of the most dangerous parts of London in the middle of the night." He stopped, eyes dropping to the folder in her hands. His expression went from angry to something far more dangerous. "What is that?" "I think you know what it is." "Where did you get it?" "Someone who thought I deserved the truth, since my husband won't give it to me." Adrian grabbed her arm, pulled her inside, shut the door. "Who gave that to you?" "I don't know, a man at the Silver Swan." Description: average height, brown hair, forgettable face. "Adrian, what is this? What are you involved in?" He took the folder from her hands, flipped through it, and his face went pale. "Where's the rest?" "That's all he gave me." "No, this is incomplete. Where's the list of contacts? The operation schedules?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Adrian swore viciously. Then he turned to her, and his eyes were harder than she'd ever seen them. "You've just walked into something you don't understand, something that could get you killed." "Then explain it to me." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because you're already in danger. Because whoever gave you those documents just painted a target on your back. Because—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "Because this is exactly what I was trying to prevent." Eliza felt cold. "Adrian, what are you involved in?" "Something bigger than social games, bigger than our marriage, bigger than—" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. "You need to leave London, tonight. Go back to the estate." "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening." "Eliza, tell me!" He stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a decision. She could see it happen. The walls coming down, the control cracking. "I work for the Crown," he said quietly. "Intelligence gathering, counter-espionage. For the past 6 years, I've been tracking a network of traders selling information to France. Naval routes, troop movements, strategic plans." Eliza's legs went weak. She sat down hard on a nearby chair. "Victoria is my partner," Adrian continued. "Not my lover. My partner. She has access to social circles I can't penetrate. Her engagement is a cover." "A cover?" "Yes. We've been closing in on the network's leader. Someone high-ranking. Someone embedded in London society." He paused. "And someone just gave you a folder full of operational intelligence, which means either they're trying to expose us or they're trying to use you against us." "Why me?" "Because you're my wife. Because hurting you hurts me. Because they've figured out you're not just decoration anymore. You're leverage." The room felt too small, too hot. Eliza tried to breathe, tried to process what she was hearing. "The letters I've been getting," she said slowly, "about your midnight meetings. Those were from them. Most likely, testing you, seeing if you'd investigate, seeing if they could turn you against me." Adrian knelt in front of her chair. "Eliza, listen to me. You need to leave London. Go to the estate. Stay there until this is over. And if I refuse, then you're in danger, real danger. These people kill, Eliza. They've killed before. And now that you've seen those documents, they know you're a threat." "I didn't ask to see them. I was trying to find out if my husband was cheating on me." "I know, but they don't care about your intentions. They care about what you know." He gripped her hands. Please, go to the estate. Let me finish this. Eliza looked at him, really looked at him, and saw someone she'd never seen before. Not cold, not controlled, just frightened. For her. What happens if I stay? She asked. They'll come after you, try to use you, or worse. And what happens to you if I leave? I do my job, same as always. Alone? Victoria is here. The name landed like a stone. Eliza pulled her hands free. Of course she is. It's not like that. Isn't it? You trust her with your secrets, your work, your life, but not me. That's not fair. Fair? Eliza stood. You've lied to me for months. Let me believe you were having an affair rather than tell me the truth. Let me destroy my reputation in front of all of London while you kept playing your games. I was protecting you. I don't need protection. I need partnership. Her voice cracked. I've proven I'm capable. I've survived everything you've thrown at me, and you still treat me like I'm too fragile for the truth. Adrian stood, jaw clenched. You don't understand what you're asking. Then help me understand. Stop shutting me out. I can't. You mean you won't, because you still see me as a liability, a weakness, something to be managed and protected and kept in the dark. They stared at each other, years of distance and distrust suddenly visible. Tell me something, Eliza said quietly. When you married me, did you even consider that I might become someone worth trusting? Or was I always just a cover story for your secret life? The question hung between them. Adrian didn't answer. Eliza nodded slowly. That's what I thought. She turned and headed for the stairs. Where are you going? Adrian called after her. To my room, to pack. You want me gone? Fine, I'll go. Eliza, but understand this, Adrian. When this is over, we're done. I'll stay married to you on paper, for appearance's sake. But I'm done trying to be something in your life when you've made it clear I'm just an inconvenience. She reached her room and slammed the door. For a long moment she stood there, breathing hard, fighting tears that wanted to fall. Then she noticed it, an envelope on her bed. Not delivered by a servant. Those went through the regular channels. Someone had been in her room. Hands shaking, Eliza opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and what she read made her blood run cold. Duchess, your husband is more than a spy. He's a murderer. 3 men dead by his hand last year alone. Ask him about the warehouse fire in Portsmouth. Ask him about the merchant who drowned in the Thames. Ask him who really killed the French attaché. He's been lying to you about more than affairs. He's been lying about who he is. You have 3 days to decide whose side you're on. Choose wisely. A friend. Eliza sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in her hands. Murder. Adrian had killed people. Maybe in service to the crown, maybe justified, but still, murder. She thought about the cold precision in how he moved, the way he could shut off emotion like a lamp being extinguished, the control that never wavered. She'd married a stranger, and the stranger was far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. A knock at her door. Adrian's voice. Eliza, open the door, please. She looked at the letter in her hands, looked at the door, and made a choice. She walked over and opened it. Adrian stood there, and whatever he saw in her face made him go still. What happened? Wordlessly, Eliza handed him the letter. She watched him read it, watched his expression shift from concern to fury to something that might have been resignation. When he looked up, his eyes were bleak. Is that what you think, that I'm a murderer? I don't know what to think anymore. The warehouse fire was an accident. We were trying to intercept a shipment, and it went wrong. The merchant was killed by the same network we're tracking. I tried to save him and failed. And the French attaché died of natural causes, despite what the conspiracy theorists claim. And the other things you've done? The things this letter doesn't mention? Adrian's silence was answer enough. You have killed people, Eliza said. It wasn't a question. In war, yes. In defense of this country, yes. Never innocent people. Never without cause. But yes, Eliza. I've killed. She nodded slowly. I see. Does that change things between us? Eliza looked at him. This man she'd married, this stranger she'd tried to know, this duke who was really a spy, who was really a killer. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't know anything anymore. Adrian stepped closer. Let me tell you what I do know. Whoever sent that letter is inside this house, or has access to it, because it was placed on your bed, which means they got past security, past servants, past everything. Ice flooded Eliza's veins. They were in my room. Yes. While I was out. Yes. Which means they're watching, closely, and they want you frightened, want you to run or turn against me or do something that breaks the operation. What operation, Adrian? What is this really about? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he made another decision. Come with me. I'll show you. He led her downstairs to his study, locked the door, and moved a bookshelf. Behind it was a door she'd never noticed. Beyond the door was a room that made Eliza's breath catch. Maps covered every wall, documents pinned in clusters, photographs of people she recognized from society events, red string connecting them in patterns she didn't understand. And in the center of it all, one name written in large letters, Lord Malcolm Thorne. Who is he? Eliza whispered. The leader of the espionage network. A lord. A member of parliament. One of the most trusted men in England. Adrian's voice was hard. And a traitor who's been selling our country's secrets to France for 5 years. Eliza stared at the wall, at the evidence, at the web of conspiracy Adrian had been tracking. We're close to exposing him, Adrian continued. Victoria has been cultivating his trust through social circles. I've been tracking his movements. In 2 weeks, he's meeting with his French handler. We catch him then, we break the entire network. And someone wants to stop you. Yes, which is why I need you gone, Eliza. Because if they can't stop me, they'll try to hurt you to distract me. She turned to face him. Or I could help you. Absolutely not. Why not? I have access to the same circles Victoria does. More, actually, after my little scandal. The fringe society is full of women married to important men. Women who hear things, know things. It's too dangerous. It's already dangerous. Someone was in my room, Adrian. I'm already a target. She moved closer. Let me help. Use me. Whatever intelligence or access you need, I can get it. No. Why? Because you don't think I can handle it? Because if something happens to you, he stopped, looked away. Because I can't protect you if you're involved. I don't need your protection. I need your trust. They stared at each other in that secret room, surrounded by evidence of conspiracy and betrayal, and something shifted between them. Finally, Adrian spoke. If you do this, you follow my rules. Absolutely. No improvising, no heroics. Agreed. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. Fine. He studied her face, searching for something. Why? Why risk yourself for this? Because I'm tired of being kept in the dark. Because this is my country too. She paused. And because if I'm going to be your wife in name, I might as well be your partner in something real. Adrian's expression softened slightly. You're insane. Probably, but so are you. He almost smiled. Almost. There's a society event tomorrow night. Lord Thorne will be there. I need you to talk to him, charm him, get information about his schedule for the next 2 weeks. What kind of information? Travel plans, social commitments, anything that might reveal when he's meeting his handler. And if he suspects? He won't. You're just a curious duchess, friendly, interested in politics. Adrian's eyes hardened. But Eliza, if anything feels wrong, if he asks questions you can't answer, if anyone approaches you suspiciously, you walk away. Immediately. I understand. He reached out, almost touched her face, then pulled back. I'm sorry. For all of this. For the lies. For putting you in danger. Apologize after we catch him, Eliza said. Right now, brief me on everything I need to know. They spent the next 3 hours going over every detail of the operation. Names, connections, cover stories, safe phrases to use if she needed help. When they finally emerged from the study, dawn was breaking over London. Eliza went to her room, exhausted but strangely alive. She was terrified. She was in over her head. She was risking everything. But for the first time since her wedding day, she felt like she was doing something that mattered. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered, "This is what you were meant for. Not just surviving, but fighting." The next evening, Eliza dressed carefully, elegant but not too formal, approachable. She rehearsed her cover story, her questions, her exit strategies. Adrian met her in the entrance hall. He looked her over, expression unreadable. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." They rode to the event in silence. Just before they arrived, Adrian grabbed her hand. "Be careful," he said. "Please." "I will." He held her hand for one more moment, then released it. The party was at Lord Pemberton's house, the same family whose ball had been the scene of Eliza's public confrontation. Walking back into that social circle felt like entering hostile territory. But Eliza held her head high and walked in like she owned the place. Lord Thorne was easy to spot, tall, distinguished, surrounded by admirers. He looked exactly like what he was, a respected member of the establishment. Eliza made her way through the crowd, seemingly casual, until she ended up near his group. "Duchess Blackwood," Lord Thorne said, noticing her. "How unexpected. I thought you'd sworn off society events." "I've sworn off boring ones," Eliza said with a smile. "This one seemed interesting." He laughed. "Direct. I like that. Tell me, how is the Duke? I rarely see him at these gatherings anymore." "He's busy with parliamentary matters. As are you, I imagine." "Always. The burden of public service." He took a drink from a passing tray. "Though I'm hoping to escape London for a few weeks soon. Recharge. Perhaps visit my estate in Sussex." "When?" Eliza asked, keeping her tone light. "I only ask because I'm organizing a charity event and was hoping for your support. End of the month, unfortunately, but I'd be happy to contribute financially." End of the month, 2 weeks away. The timeline matched what Adrian had predicted. They chatted for a few more minutes, and Eliza extracted the information she needed. His departure date, his travel route, even the fact that he planned to stop in Dover first. Dover. The port city, where a man might meet a French contact. She excused herself and found Adrian across the room. Their eyes met. She gave a subtle nod. They'd found their window. But as Eliza turned to leave, she felt it, the weight of eyes on her back. She glanced around casually and saw Victoria Hartley watching her from across the room. Their eyes locked. Victoria smiled slowly. Then she raised her glass in a mocking toast. Eliza's blood ran cold. Because Victoria's smile wasn't friendly, it was predatory. And suddenly, Eliza realized something was very, very wrong. Eliza kept her expression neutral as she turned away from Victoria's knowing smile, but her pulse hammered against her ribs. She moved through the crowd, not too fast, heading toward Adrian's position near the windows. Before she reached him, a hand caught her elbow. "Duchess." Victoria's voice was silk and poison. "A word?" "I'm afraid I'm just leaving." It wasn't a request. Victoria's grip tightened, fingers digging in just enough to hurt. Her smile never wavered. "Walk with me to the terrace. Now. Unless you want me to make a scene that'll make your last performance look like a curtsy." Eliza's mind raced. She could call for Adrian, pull away. But if Victoria exposed something here in front of everyone, the entire operation could collapse. "Fine," she said quietly. The terrace. They moved through the glass doors into cool night air. The terrace was empty, music and laughter muted behind them. Victoria released her arm and turned, all pretense of civility gone. "You stupid, stupid woman. Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I don't know what you mean." "Don't play innocent. I saw you, working Lord Thorne, extracting his schedule." Victoria's laugh was sharp. "Adrian actually brought you in. I told him it was a mistake. I told him you weren't ready, but he never listens when it comes to you." Eliza's breath caught. "You're his partner." Was I not clear about that? We've been working together for 6 years, 6 years of careful planning, of building trust, of getting close to these people. Victoria stepped closer, eyes blazing. "And then he marries you? Some country nobody who can't even handle a London season without falling apart. And now he's risking everything by involving you in this?" "He trusted me with the truth." "He trusts you?" Victoria's voice dripped contempt. "He feels guilty about you. There's a difference. You're his obligation, his responsibility, the wife he never wanted but got stuck with anyway." The words cut deeper than they should have. Eliza forced herself to stay steady. If you're trying to hurt my feelings, you'll have to do better than that. I'm trying to save this operation because you just tipped our hand. Victoria pulled a small card from her sleeve. This was left on my carriage seat tonight. Eliza took it. One sentence in elegant script. The Duchess is learning to play. How quaint. Her blood went cold. Someone's watching us, Victoria said. Watching you. And they know you're involved now, which means we're compromised. Or it means they're trying to make us think we're compromised, to panic us into making mistakes. Victoria stared at her. That's surprisingly astute. I'm not an idiot, despite what you think. No, just wildly inexperienced and dangerous because of it. Victoria took the card back. I need you to walk away. Tell Adrian you changed your mind. Go back to the estate. Let us finish this. No. This isn't a game. I know it's not a game. Eliza's voice shook slightly, but she held Victoria's gaze. I know people have died. I know we're all in danger, and I'm still not walking away. Why? To prove something to your husband? To feel important? Because I can help. I have access you don't. Those women in my fringe society, their husbands are in Thorne's circle. They hear things, know things. I can gather intelligence you and Adrian can't. Victoria studied her for a long moment. You really believe that? Yes. Oh, then you're either braver or more foolish than I thought. Victoria turned toward the ballroom. Stay out of my way, Duchess. And if you get Adrian killed because you're playing spy, I'll destroy you myself. She disappeared inside, leaving Eliza alone on the terrace. Eliza pressed her hands against the cold stone railing, trying to stop them from shaking. Victoria was right about one thing. She was inexperienced. She'd stumbled into espionage with no training, no preparation, nothing but determination and desperation to finally matter in Adrian's life. But she wasn't wrong. She did have access. Information. Resources Victoria couldn't touch. She just had to figure out how to use them without getting everyone killed. When she went back inside, Adrian was waiting near the entrance hall. One look at her face, and his expression darkened. What happened? Victoria knows I'm involved. Someone left her a note. Adrian swore quietly. Show me. She kept it, but it said something about me learning to play. They're trying to rattle us, make us suspicious of each other. He looked around, then lowered his voice. We need to leave. Now. Before... Duchess Blackwood! Lord Thorne appeared beside them, jovial and completely oblivious to the tension. Before you go, I wanted to invite you and the Duke to dinner next week. Small gathering. Just a few close friends. Eliza felt Adrian tense beside her. Having dinner at Thorne's home, surrounded by potential conspirators, was either an incredible opportunity or a death sentence. We'd be honored, Eliza heard herself say. Thorne beamed. Excellent. Thursday at 8. I'll send the details. After he walked away, Adrian grabbed her arm and pulled her toward their carriage. He didn't speak until they were inside, door closed, moving through London streets. What were you thinking? His voice was low and furious. Accepting that invitation without consulting me? I was thinking it's an opportunity to get inside his house, see who else is involved. It's also an opportunity for them to trap us, question us, separate us and see if our stories match. Then we make sure our stories match. Eliza turned to face him. Adrian, we can't just wait for him to leave for Dover. What if the timeline changes? What if he suspects something and runs? We need more information. And you think playing dinner guest is how we get it? I think it's better than sitting around hoping our surveillance is enough. Adrian stared at her, jaw clenched. Then, surprisingly, he laughed, short and harsh. You're actually serious? Yes. You have no training, no experience with interrogation or counterintelligence. And you want to walk into a traitor's house and spy on him over dinner? Yes. He shook his head, but something in his expression shifted. You're either going to get us all killed or you're going to be surprisingly effective. I can't decide which. Can it be both? This time his laugh was genuine, brief, but real. Maybe. The carriage stopped outside their townhouse. Adrian helped her down, and for a moment his hand lingered on hers. Eliza, he said quietly, if we do this, if you come to that dinner, you need to understand the risk. These aren't society gossips. They're dangerous people. If they even suspect you're gathering intelligence, I know. Do you? Because it's one thing to restructure household budgets and charm social circles. It's another to lie to a man who's killed his own agents to protect his secrets. Eliza met his eyes. Then teach me. You have 4 days. Teach me how to be convincing. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Starting tomorrow, early, and Eliza, this won't be pleasant. He was right. It wasn't pleasant. For the next 4 days, Adrian drilled her mercilessly. He taught her how to lie without tells, how to deflect questions, how to remember cover stories, how to read a room for threats. He played Lord Thorne, interrogating her with increasingly hostile questions. When she hesitated or stammered, he pushed harder. When she got defensive, he showed her why that was a weakness. Again, he'd say, "What's your interest in naval policy?" "My father served in the Navy. I've always been curious about—" "Your father was Army. Try again." "My uncle served—" "Your uncle died when you were 3. You wouldn't remember him well enough to claim interest." Again. By the 3rd day, Eliza wanted to scream, or cry, or throw something at his infuriatingly composed face. "I can't do this," she said, voice cracking. "I can't remember all these lies." "Then don't lie." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Tell the truth. Just not all of it." "What does that mean?" "You're curious about politics." "True. You've heard your husband discuss naval matters." "Also true. You want to understand the issues facing England." "True." He met her eyes. "The lie isn't what you say, it's what you don't say, what you let them assume." Something clicked. Eliza straightened. "Again. Ask me again." Adrian's eyes gleamed. "What's your interest in naval policy?" "I've been listening to the Duke discuss it, trying to understand. I find I'm quite ignorant about how our government actually functions. It's embarrassing, really." "Self-deprecating. Good. Why this dinner specifically?" "Lord Thorne is known to be brilliant on these matters. I thought it would be educational. And honestly—" Eliza smiled slightly. "After my behavior at the Pemberton Ball, I need to rebuild my reputation. Being seen with respected men like Lord Thorne helps." Adrian sat back, something like approval on his face. Better. Much better. By Thursday, Eliza was as ready as she'd ever be. She dressed carefully, elegant but not ostentatious. A duchess, not a spy. In the carriage, Adrian reviewed the plan one final time. "I'll stay close to you whenever possible. But if we're separated, use the phrase 'I'm feeling slightly faint' if you need extraction. I'll make our excuses and we leave immediately. And if I learn something important, don't react. Don't pursue it. Just note it and tell me later. Your job is to observe and listen. Nothing more." "Adrian," Eliza touched his hand. "I can do this." He looked at her hand on his, then up at her face. "I know. That's what worries me." Lord Thorne's London residence was smaller than the Blackwood townhouse, but impressively appointed. They were shown into a drawing room where a dozen guests were already assembled. Eliza recognized most of them, minor nobility, a few MPs, 2 naval officers, and in the corner, looking perfectly at ease, Victoria Hartley. Of course she was here. "Duchess Duke!" Thorne approached, all warmth. "So glad you could come. You know most of the guests, I think?" Introductions were made. Eliza smiled and nodded and tried not to stare at the naval officers. Were they part of the conspiracy? Or innocent guests? At dinner, she found herself seated between a captain named Wexford and a lord whose name she immediately forgot. Adrian was across the table, Victoria 2 seats down from him. The conversation was exactly what she'd expected: politics, war, trade routes. The men debated naval strategy while the women mostly listened. Eliza listened carefully, not just to what was said, but how it was said, who agreed with whom, who deflected certain topics, who seemed too knowledgeable about classified information. Captain Wexford was interesting. He spoke with authority about Mediterranean shipping routes that, according to Adrian's briefing, had been compromised by the espionage network. "The French have been remarkably well informed lately," Wexford said, sipping his wine. "Almost as if they know our patrol schedules in advance." "Perhaps we have a security problem," suggested the lord beside Eliza. "Or perhaps we're simply predictable," Thorne said smoothly. "We've used the same routes for decades. Any competent intelligence officer could deduce our patterns." The conversation moved on, but Eliza noticed Victoria watching Wexford carefully, making the same assessment Eliza was making. After dinner, the ladies withdrew to the drawing room while the men stayed for port and cigars. Eliza found herself trapped in conversation with three women discussing the merits of various dressmakers. She was about to excuse herself when Victoria appeared at her elbow. "Walk with me," Victoria murmured. "Now." They stepped into an adjoining library. Victoria closed the door. "Wexford is one of them," she said without preamble. "I'm certain of it. The way he spoke about those roots, he knows too much." "I noticed that too. We need to search Thorne's study. Tonight, while everyone's here." Eliza blinked. "That's insane. We're surrounded by guests, which is exactly why it'll work. They're all distracted. Thorne is playing host. If we move now, quickly, we might find evidence. Adrian will never agree to this." "Then we don't tell Adrian. We just do it." Victoria's eyes were hard. "I've been working this case for 6 years. I'm not going to lose it because we're too cautious." Every instinct told Eliza this was a bad idea, but Victoria was right about one thing. They might not get another chance. "Where's his study?" "Second floor, third door on the right." "I'll create a distraction. You search." "Why me?" "Because if I'm caught up there, I have no excuse. But you're new to this house. You could claim you got lost looking for the ladies' retiring room." Victoria moved toward the door. 5 minutes. That's all you have." Before Eliza could argue, Victoria was gone. Eliza stood in the library, heart hammering. This was reckless, dangerous, everything Adrian had warned her against, but it might also work. She slipped into the hallway, moved toward the stairs. The house was busy with servants clearing dishes, guests milling about. No one paid attention to one more woman in an evening gown. She reached the second floor, found the third door. It was unlocked. Thorne's study was neat, organized, a desk with papers arranged in precise stacks, bookshelves lining the walls, a locked cabinet that probably held anything truly incriminating. Eliza moved to the desk. Her hand shook as she lifted papers, scanning quickly. Bills, correspondence, nothing obviously treasonous. Then she saw it. A letter, half hidden under a ledger. The paper was different, thicker, foreign, and the wax seal had been broken. She lifted it carefully, read the first few lines. It was in French. Her French was adequate, learned from a governess years ago. She could make out enough to understand someone was confirming a meeting in Dover, 3 days from now. Her breath caught. This was it. Proof. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Panic flooded through her. She shoved the letter back under the ledger, tried to arrange everything exactly as it had been, and looked around desperately for somewhere to hide. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Eliza dove behind a large armchair just as the door opened. 2 voices. Men. One of them Thorne. "I'm telling you, we need to move the meeting up. I don't trust the situation. We can't change now. Everything's arranged. The French contact is expecting us in 3 days." 3 days is too long. I've been getting warnings. Someone's asking questions. Eliza's pulse thundered in her ears. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to stay perfectly still. "What kind of questions?" The second voice. Wexford. "The Duke. Blackwood. He's been too interested in naval movements. And his wife has been socializing with people she shouldn't, gathering information." "The scandalous Duchess?" Wexford laughed. "She's harmless. Just a bored woman playing at society." "Maybe. Or maybe that's what they want us to think." Silence. Then Wexford. "You think Blackwood is investigating us?" "I think we should be careful. Finish this last exchange and shut down the operation. Take our payment and disappear." "What about Hartley?" "Lady Victoria? She's useful, keeps Blackwood distracted." Eliza's mind reeled. "Victoria keeps Adrian distracted? What did that mean?" "I still think you're being paranoid," Wexford said. "But fine. Dover in 3 days. Then we're done." "Agreed. Now come on. We've been gone too long." The door closed. Footsteps faded. Eliza waited a full minute before moving. Then she crept out from behind the chair, legs shaking so badly she could barely walk. She had to tell Adrian. About the letter, about the conversation, about Victoria. Victoria keeps Blackwood distracted. Eliza's stomach turned cold. What if Victoria wasn't Adrian's partner? What if she was working for Thorne, playing both sides? She made it back downstairs into the drawing room. Adrian caught her eye across the room, and whatever he saw on her face made him immediately move toward her. "We need to leave," Eliza said quietly. "Now." "What happened?" "Not here. Please, just get us out of here." Adrian made their excuses, Eliza feeling unwell, so sorry, another time. Thorne was gracious. Victoria watched them leave with an expression Eliza couldn't read. In the carriage, Eliza told Adrian everything: the letter, the conversation, the suspicion about Victoria. Adrian's face went white. "She told you to search the study." "Yes." "While she created a distraction." "Yes." "Adrian, what if it was a test?" His voice was flat. "To see if you'd actually do it. To see if you'd been turned." "Or what if she's the one who's been turned?" Adrian stared at her. Then he leaned forward, gave the driver an address Eliza didn't recognize. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe, where we can talk without being overheard." He looked at her. "Because if Victoria is compromised, then everything, every operation, every contact, every piece of intelligence from the last 6 years is suspect." They ended up at a nondescript building near the docks. Adrian had a key. Inside was a single room with a table, chairs, and maps pinned to the walls. "Safe house," Adrian explained. "Only 3 people know about it. Me, my handler, and Victoria," Eliza finished. "Yes." They stood there in the dim room, the weight of betrayal settling between them. "Tell me everything again," Adrian said. Every word they said. Exactly. Eliza repeated the conversation as precisely as she could remember. Adrian listened, face growing darker. "Hartley keeps Blackwood distracted," he repeated. "That could mean anything. Or it could mean she's been feeding you false intelligence while working for them." "For 6 years? Impossible. I'd have noticed." "Would you?" Eliza's voice was gentle. "You trusted her. Completely. That's how betrayal works, isn't it? They get close, earn trust, then use it against you." Adrian sank into a chair, pressing his hands against his face. "If she's compromised, I need to know how deep it goes, what she's revealed, who else might be working with her. The meeting is in 3 days in Dover, that's confirmed. If it's not a trap." "It wasn't a trap. They didn't know I was listening. Adrian, I heard them. Thorne is paranoid. He wants to finish this and run. That desperation is real." Adrian looked up at her. "You're certain?" "Yes." He studied her for a long moment, then he stood, moving to the maps on the wall. "If Victoria is compromised, we can't use any of our usual resources. No regular contacts, no official channels. It's just us. And the information I have. And the information you have," he agreed. He turned to face her. "Eliza, what I'm about to ask you to do is dangerous. More dangerous than anything so far. Tell me. I need you to go back to your fringe society women. Find out which of their husbands are traveling to Dover in the next 3 days. Any reason, any excuse. We need to know who else might be involved. I can do that. And I need you to get a message to Lord Pemberton, in person. Tell him I need a meeting, tonight. He'll know what that means." "Pemberton? The host of the ball where I made a scene?" "He's my handler, has been for 8 years. Eliza's world tilted slightly. "The man who saw me publicly humiliate myself is your superior in intelligence work." "Yes, and he's been watching you ever since, testing you, seeing if you were a liability or an asset." Adrian's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, he was impressed. "Impressed? Oh, you rebuilt your reputation after that disaster, made allies in places Victoria couldn't reach, created an intelligence network without even meaning to." He moved closer. "You did exactly what a good operative does. You adapted." Eliza didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "So my social suicide was actually useful? Extraordinarily useful. Those women trust you. They'll tell you things they'd never tell anyone in the traditional power structure. Because I'm an outsider, like them." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "All right. I'll talk to them, get the information, meet Pemberton. Be careful. If Victoria suspects we're onto her, she'll move against us." "I know." Adrian caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Eliza, I'm sorry for all of this, for bringing you into this world, for putting you in danger. Stop apologizing. She squeezed his hand. I chose this. I'm choosing it, and we're going to stop them. His expression shifted, something raw and almost vulnerable crossing his face. When this is over, we'll figure out what comes next. But right now, we have work to do. She pulled her hand free and headed for the door. Behind her, she heard Adrian's quiet voice. Thank you for trusting me. She looked back. I could say the same to you. The next morning, Eliza called an emergency meeting of the Fringe Society. 12 women showed up within 2 hours, proof of the genuine bond she'd built. I need your help, Eliza said once they were assembled. I need to know if any of your husbands are traveling to Dover in the next few days. Why? Asked Sarah, the woman who'd spoken up at that first meeting. Eliza made a split-second decision. Because I believe there's going to be a meeting there, a dangerous one, and I need to know who's involved. The women exchanged glances. Then Margaret, married to a naval officer, spoke up. My husband is leaving tomorrow, said it was for naval business in Dover. Mine too, said another woman. Lieutenant Carson, he's been very secretive about it. 3 more women confirmed their husbands were traveling to Dover, all military or government men, all leaving within the next 2 days. Eliza felt cold. The conspiracy was bigger than they'd thought. Can you tell me anything else? Times? Where they're staying? The women shared what they knew. Eliza memorized every detail. One more thing, Eliza said carefully. Has anyone mentioned Lady Victoria Hartley? Any connection to your husbands? Silence. Then Sarah said quietly, Lady Victoria hosted a dinner last month, only for certain men and their wives. Very exclusive. Very secretive. Who attended? Sarah listed names. Half of them were women in this room. Did anything unusual happen? They separated us after dinner. Men in one room, women in another. We thought it was just traditional, but now that you mention it, the men were closed up in that room for over 2 hours. 2 hours. Long enough for recruitment, for planning, for treason. Eliza thanked them and promised to explain everything once the danger passed. Then she went to find Lord Pemberton. He received her in his study, expression neutral. Duchess, Adrian said you needed to speak with me urgently. Eliza told him everything. The overheard conversation, the suspicions about Victoria, the information from her network of women. Pemberton listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stood and paced to the window. Victoria Hartley has been one of our most valuable assets for 6 years, he said finally. If she's been turned, the damage is incalculable. I know, but I know what I heard. I believe you, which means we have 3 days to catch Thorne, verify Victoria's loyalty or betrayal, and dismantle this network before they disappear. He turned to face her. I'm authorizing an operation, non-standard, no official backup, just you, Adrian, and whatever resources you can gather. Just us? If Victoria is compromised, we can't trust anyone in the regular channels. But a duke, his wife, and a handful of respectable citizens traveling to Dover? That's believable. That's safe. Eliza's heart hammered. You want me to go to Dover, to the meeting? I want you to do what you've been doing. Gather intelligence. Be observant. Let your husband handle the dangerous parts. Pemberton's eyes were hard. But yes, this operation is now yours. What about Victoria? Leave her to me. I'll handle that end. You focus on Thorne. Eliza nodded, mind already racing with plans. I'll need my women. The Fringe Society. Their husbands are involved. We can use that. Well, how? The wives know their husbands' schedules, their habits, where they'll be and when. If we coordinate, we can make sure certain people are in certain places when we need them there. Pemberton smiled slowly. Using society connections as an intelligence network. Clever. Adrian taught you well. Actually, Eliza said, I learned that on my own. She spent the rest of the day planning. By evening, she had a strategy. Risky, complicated, dependent on perfect timing, and a dozen women who'd never done anything like this before. But it might work. Adrian came home around midnight. She was in his study, their study now, surrounded by maps and notes. Pemberton briefed me, he said. You're sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He moved to the table, studied her plans. This is ambitious. This is necessary. If Victoria is there, then we deal with her. But Adrian, we can't let Thorne escape. He's killed people, sold out our military. He needs to face justice. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression changed. When did you become so brave? I've always been brave. You just never noticed. He reached across the table, took her hand. I notice now. They worked through the night, refining the plan. By dawn, they were ready. The next day, they traveled to Dover with 6 women from the Fringe Society. To anyone watching, it looked like a social excursion, a duchess and her friends visiting the coast. In reality, they were an intelligence operation. The women spread through Dover, watching, listening, reporting back through messages delivered by servants who looked like nothing more than ladies' maids running errands. By evening of the second day, they'd confirmed Thorne was in Dover. So was Wexford. So were 4 other men whose names appeared in Adrian's files. And so was Victoria. She's here, Eliza told Adrian in their rented room overlooking the harbor. At the Crown Inn. She checked in this morning. With Thorne? No, separately. But she's definitely here. Adrian's jaw clenched. Then we spring the trap tomorrow night, at the meeting. What if she warns them? She won't, because she doesn't know we know. To her, we're still in London, trusting her, dependent on her intelligence. And if she is actually loyal? If we're wrong? Then I owe her an apology and possibly my career. Adrian looked at Eliza. But I don't think we're wrong. Neither did Eliza. The next day crawled past. Eliza and her women maintained their cover, shopping, having tea, being exactly what they appeared to be. Underneath, they watched, waited. Evening came. Eliza dressed carefully, dark clothes, practical shoes. Adrian had given her a small knife to keep in her boot. She hoped she wouldn't need it. At 10 o'clock, they moved into position. The meeting was happening in a warehouse near the docks, the same location that had appeared on Thorne's correspondence. Adrian went in first, alone, through the front. Eliza and Sarah, who'd insisted on coming despite the danger, waited at the back entrance. Through a cracked window, Eliza could see inside. A dozen men, Thorne at the center, Wexford beside him. And standing slightly apart, Victoria. A man Eliza didn't recognize stepped forward. French, from his accent. You have the information? Thorne handed over a leather case. Naval positions for the next quarter. Troop movements. Everything you asked for. And payment? As agreed. The Frenchman handed over a different case. Thorne opened it, checking the contents. That's when Adrian stepped out of the shadows. Lord Malcolm Thorne, you're under arrest for treason against the Crown. Chaos erupted. Men scattered. Wexford went for his pistol. Victoria moved, but not toward the exit. She moved toward Thorne, weapon drawn. Eliza's heart stopped. Victoria was arresting him. She was on their side. But then Victoria spoke, and the words froze Eliza's blood. Sorry, Adrian, but I'm afraid you're the one under arrest for interfering with a Crown operation. Adrian stared at her. What? Did you really think I'd betray my country? I've been running this operation for 8 months, feeding Thorne false information, building a case. Victoria's smile was cold. You just walked into my arrest. That's not possible. Pemberton authorized my operation, not yours. You've been running unauthorized surveillance, playing vigilante, and you just compromised months of work by showing up here. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense, but the armed men now surrounding Adrian were very real. Eliza acted on instinct. She burst through this back door, knife in hand, and threw it with precision learned from boredom at the estate, practicing for hours on trees. It struck Victoria's hand. She dropped her weapon with a cry. In the chaos that followed, Adrian moved. He grabbed the dropped gun, held it on the room. Nobody move! But it was too late. Thorne was running. The French contact was running. Half the conspirators were disappearing into the night, and Victoria, cradling her injured hand, was staring at Eliza with pure fury. You stupid girl! Do you have any idea what you've just done? But Eliza was looking at something else. At the leather case still on the ground. At the documents spilling out, real documents, with real information that would actually harm England if they reached France. This isn't false intelligence, Eliza said slowly. These are real naval positions. Victoria's expression shifted, just for a second, and in that second, Eliza saw the truth. Victoria had been turned, maybe recently, maybe months ago, but she'd been feeding Thorne real information while claiming to run a sting operation, and she'd almost gotten away with it. Adrian, Eliza said quietly. She's lying. Adrian looked at the documents, at Victoria, at the truth neither of them wanted to see. Then he made his choice. He aimed the pistol at Victoria. Don't move, any of you. But they were outnumbered, and the remaining conspirators were armed. Sarah appeared in the doorway, flanked by the other women from the Fringe Society, and behind them, a dozen naval officers. We brought reinforcements, Sarah said calmly. Our husbands, the loyal ones. The officers moved in, securing the scene. Victoria tried to run. She made it 3 steps before Margaret's husband tackled her. Eliza watched as the woman who'd been Adrian's partner for 6 years was dragged away, screaming about betrayal and false accusations. The evidence would sort out the truth eventually. But right now, in this moment, Eliza knew they'd won. Not completely. Thorne had escaped, so had the French contact and several others, but they'd broken the network, seized the documents, captured Victoria. It was a victory. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. Adrian came to stand beside her as the officers secured the warehouse. You threw a knife at her, he said. I did. Where did you learn to throw a knife? I was very bored at the estate. Your groundskeeper taught me. Adrian laughed, actually laughed. Of course he did. They stood together, watching the aftermath, and Eliza felt something shift between them. The distance that had always existed, the gap between arrangement and actual partnership, had finally closed. Not because they'd fallen in love. Not because they'd suddenly become the passionate couple she'd once imagined marriage might involve. But because they'd fought together, trusted each other, become actual partners in something that mattered. What happens now? Eliza asked. Now we go home. Debrief. Figure out how to find Thorne before he disappears forever. Adrian paused. And I suppose we need to talk. About us. Do we? We can't go back to how things were. Not after this. No, Eliza agreed. We can't. They looked at each other in the dim light of the warehouse, surrounded by evidence of conspiracy and betrayal, and somehow it felt like the most honest moment of their marriage. Whatever came next, whether it was love or just respect, passion, or just partnership, it would be real. And that, Eliza thought, was more than she'd ever expected when she'd climbed into that carriage 3 years ago, heading toward an arranged marriage with a man who treated her like furniture. She'd proven him wrong, proven everyone wrong, proven herself right, and she'd done it without asking anyone's permission. The carriage ride back to London felt longer than the journey out. Eliza sat across from Adrian, watching the countryside blur past in the gray dawn light. Neither of them had slept. Neither of them had spoken much since leaving Dover. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy with everything unsaid. Pemberton wants to see us immediately, Adrian said finally. As soon as we arrive. To debrief? To explain why I ran an unauthorized operation that resulted in the escape of a high-value target. His voice was flat. Victoria was supposedly running a sanctioned sting. I interfered. Even if she was turned, the optics are complicated. The optics, Eliza repeated. We stopped classified information from reaching France. We exposed a traitor. And you're worried about optics? Welcome to intelligence work, where success is often indistinguishable from failure depending on who's writing the report. Eliza leaned forward. Then we make sure the right story gets told. We have the documents. We have witnesses. We have proof Victoria was feeding real intelligence to the enemy. We have suspicions, not proof. Not yet. Adrian rubbed his face. She's claiming she was running a sophisticated deception operation, that the documents were bait, that she planned to arrest everyone, including the French contact, but I ruined it by showing up early. That's absurd. The documents were real. Were they? How do we know she didn't plant false information that looks real? That's exactly what a good counterintelligence operation would do. He met her eyes. I'm not saying she's innocent. I'm saying proving her guilt is going to be harder than you think. The townhouse appeared through the morning fog. Home. Except it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like another stage, another performance, another place where nothing was quite real. Pemberton was waiting in Adrian's study. He looked older than Eliza remembered, worn down by something that went beyond mere fatigue. "Sit," he said without preamble. They sat. "Lord Thorne is gone, disappeared completely. The French contact made it onto a ship that's probably halfway to Calais by now. 3 of the conspirators we arrested are already claiming diplomatic immunity." Pemberton's gaze was cold. "And Lady Victoria Hartley is telling anyone who'll listen that you, Duke Blackwood, sabotaged a crown operation out of personal jealousy." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Is it true?" Pemberton asked. "No." "Prove it." "The documents." "Could be forgeries, could be disinformation, could be exactly what she claims. Bait for a larger trap." Pemberton turned to Eliza. "You're the one who threw the knife. Why?" "Because I heard Thorne's conversation 3 nights ago. He was moving real intelligence, not fake, real. And Victoria's story about running a sting doesn't explain why she didn't tell Adrian, her supposed partner, about it. Unless she suspected Adrian was compromised." "Was I compromised?" Adrian asked quietly. "No, but she could have thought you were." Pemberton stood, paced to the window. "Here's what I know. Victoria Hartley has been one of our most valuable assets for 6 years. She's provided intelligence that saved hundreds of lives, stopped 3 major attacks. Her record is impeccable." "Until it wasn't," Eliza said. "Until allegedly it wasn't," Pemberton corrected. "Right now it's her word against yours, and frankly her word carries more weight. Because she's been in the game longer," Adrian said. "Because she hasn't recently married a woman who then became involved in unauthorized intelligence gathering and caused a public scandal at a society ball." Pemberton's tone was blunt. "Your judgment is questionable, Adrian, especially regarding your wife." The words hung in the air like poison. "My judgment," Adrian said slowly, "regarding my wife is the only thing that's been correct. She infiltrated social circles we couldn't touch, built a network of intelligence sources, uncovered Victoria's meetings with Thorne, and stopped classified documents from leaving the country. Or interrupted a carefully planned arrest." "You don't believe that," Eliza said. "If you did, we'd already be in custody." Pemberton turned to look at her. Something shifted in his expression. "No, I don't believe it, but I need proof, real proof. Not just your word that you overheard a conversation. What kind of proof?" "The kind that shows Victoria was turned. When it happened. How it happened. Who turned her?" He moved back to the desk. "You have 72 hours. Find me something concrete, or I have to accept her version of events. Which means Adrian faces court-martial for insubordination, and you, Duchess, face charges for interfering with Crown operations." They left Pemberton's office in silence. Outside, London was waking up. Vendors calling, carriages rattling, the city moving forward while their world threatened to collapse. 72 hours, Eliza said. "How do we prove Victoria's betrayal in 72 hours? We find out when she was turned. Follow the money, the meetings, the pattern." Adrian's voice was grim. "And we do it without any official resources because we can't trust anyone. We have the Fringe Society." Adrian looked at her. "Your society ladies?" "They're not just society ladies. They're women married to men who know things, who see things, who have access to places and information we don't." Eliza's mind was already racing. Victoria moved in the same circles. Someone must have noticed something, a change in behavior, new expenditures, different associations. It's a long shot. It's the only shot we have. They spent the rest of the day reaching out to the women, quietly, carefully. Not explaining everything, just asking questions. "Has anyone noticed anything unusual about Lady Victoria Hartley? Changes in her habits? New friends? Different spending?" By evening, they had fragments. Pieces that didn't quite fit together. Margaret mentioned Victoria had recently purchased a new property outside London, paid in cash, which was unusual for someone of her station. Sarah noted Victoria had been spending time with a French émigré named Philippe Dubois. A banker, supposedly. Very wealthy, very private. Another woman, Catherine, married to a treasury official, mentioned something strange. Victoria had sold off several family heirlooms 6 months ago, quietly. through private dealers rather than auction. She needed money, Eliza said, spreading the information across Adrian's desk. Why would she need money? She has a generous allowance from her father's estate. Unless she was being blackmailed, or paying for something she couldn't explain, or being paid for her betrayal and trying to hide it by selling personal items to muddy the financial trail. Adrian studied the notes. The property outside London. That's interesting. Why buy property if you're planning to disappear after one last intelligent sale? Unless you're not planning to disappear. Unless you think you're going to get away with it. They looked at each other, the same realization dawning. She was going to frame you, Eliza said slowly. The entire operation. She lets Thorne complete the sale, then arrests everyone and claims you were the real traitor. You, who've been acting suspiciously, running unauthorized surveillance, who conveniently showed up at the Dover meeting to interfere, making her look like the hero who caught a rogue agent, and explaining away any evidence of her involvement as part of her deep cover operation. Adrian swore softly. It almost worked. It still might work. Unless we prove she was turned. The French banker, Dubois. That's our link. Adrian stood. If we can prove he's not just a banker, if he's French intelligence, then Victoria's relationship with him becomes evidence of conspiracy. How do we prove that in 72 hours? We break into his office, tonight, and we find proof. Eliza stared at him. You're serious? Do you have a better idea? She didn't, which is how she found herself, 6 hours later, dressed in dark clothing, breaking into a banker's office in the middle of the night. The building was in a respectable part of London, which made their presence even more suspicious. Adrian picked the lock while Eliza kept watch. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure someone would hear it. Got it, Adrian whispered. The door swung open. Inside, Dubois' office was exactly what you'd expect. Elegant, expensive, boring. Ledgers and contracts and correspondence that all looked perfectly legitimate. They searched systematically. Adrian took the desk. Eliza took the filing cabinets. An hour passed. Then 2. Eliza was starting to think they'd find nothing when her fingers touched something odd at the back of a drawer. A false bottom. She pried it up carefully. Underneath was a small leather journal. Adrian. He came over. Together they opened it. The journal was in code, but some things didn't need translation. Dates, amounts, initials. And there repeatedly, V.H. Victoria Hartley. This is it, Eliza breathed. This is proof she was meeting with him. It's proof of meetings, not proof of what those meetings were about. But Adrian was already copying pages by the light of their single candle. Still, it's something. They heard footsteps in the hallway. Both of them froze. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Eliza's hand went to the knife in her boot. Adrian moved toward the window, their planned escape route. The door handle turned. Light flooded the room. A man stood in the doorway. Not Dubois. Someone younger. Armed. Don't move, the man said in French-accented English. Adrian raised his hand slowly. We're just leaving. I don't think so. Monsieur Dubois will want to speak with you, both of you. The man's smile was cold. The Duke and Duchess Blackwood. He's been expecting you. They were marched at gunpoint through back corridors to a private room. Dubois waited there, middle-aged, refined, with the kind of face that could disappear in any crowd. Your Grace. Your Grace. He nodded to each of them. Please, sit. We'll stand, Adrian said. As you wish, though this might take a while. Dubois poured himself brandy. You've been investigating Lady Victoria. Why? That's not your concern. I'm afraid it is. You see, Victoria is important to certain interests. Interests that don't appreciate your interference. French interests, Eliza said. Dubois smiled. I represent several parties, all of them very concerned about your recent activities in Dover. Then they should be concerned, because we're about to expose an entire espionage network. Are you? With what proof? The journal you found? Dubois gestured to the guard, who held up the stolen book. That will be returned to its hiding place, and you'll be found tomorrow morning victims of a tragic accident. 2 aristocrats who broke into the wrong building. So sad. People know we're here, Eliza said. If something happens to us, who knows? Your society ladies, they'll assume you went home. Your staff, they think you're at a private event. Dubois sipped his brandy. No one is coming. No one knows. You've been very cleverly isolated. Adrian's hand twitched toward his pocket. The guard's gun swung toward him. Please don't, Dubois said mildly. I'd prefer not to kill you in my office. Too messy, but I will if necessary. Eliza's mind raced. They needed a distraction, a way out, something. The window behind Dubois exploded inward. Glass showered everywhere. The guard spun, firing at the window. Adrian lunged, tackling him. Eliza grabbed a lamp and smashed it over Dubois' head as he reached for his own weapon. Through the broken window, Helena's voice called out, "Move, now!" Eliza didn't question it. She grabbed Adrian's arm and they dove through the window into the alley below. It was only a 6-foot drop, but it felt like flying. Helena stood there with 4 other women from the fringe society, and behind them a dozen men, their husbands, the loyal ones, the ones who'd helped in Dover. We followed you, Helena explained as they ran. You're not the only one who can conduct surveillance, Duchess. They made it 3 streets away before stopping, gasping for breath. Behind them, shouts and running footsteps, but they disappeared into London's maze of alleys. How did you know? Eliza demanded. We didn't, but we knew something was wrong when you started asking about Victoria, so we watched, followed. And when you broke into that building, we figured you might need backup. Helena's smile was fierce. Turns out we were right. Adrian was staring at the women with something like awe. You just assaulted a French intelligence officer. We broke a window, Margaret corrected. Different thing entirely. You saved our lives. That's what friends do. They made it back to the townhouse just as dawn broke. Eliza's hands were still shaking. Adrian was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but they were alive, and they had leverage. Dubois confirmed it, Adrian said to Pemberton an hour later. Victoria is working with French intelligence. He said it himself. But he said she was important to certain interests. That's not the same as confirmation. But Pemberton looked troubled. Still, combined with the journal entries, the property purchase, the relationship with a known foreign agent, it's enough to warrant investigation. It's enough to arrest her, Eliza said. It's enough to question her. There's a difference. Pemberton leaned back. But you've done well. Better than I expected. Between your intelligence network and the evidence you've gathered, we have a case. What happens now? Adrian asked. Now we bring her in, carefully, and we find out how deep this goes. Pemberton looked at them both. You understand you've made enemies, powerful ones. Dubois will report this. His superiors will want revenge. Let them come, Eliza said. We're not hiding anymore. Pemberton's expression shifted to something almost like approval. No, I suppose you're not. Victoria's arrest happened quietly. No public scene, no drama. Just 4 agents arriving at her home early one morning and taking her away for questioning. The interrogation lasted 3 days. Eliza wasn't allowed to attend, but Adrian reported back each evening with updates. Victoria denied everything at first, claimed harassment, persecution, a vendetta by a jealous husband. Then they showed her the journal, the financial records, the testimony from Dubois' guard who'd been arrested trying to flee the country. She broke on the 3rd day. It started 6 months ago, she confessed. Dubois approached her at a society event. He knew things about her, debts she'd hidden, a scandal involving her brother, family secrets she'd buried. He offered money and protection in exchange for information. She convinced herself it was harmless at first, just small details, nothing critical. But it never stayed small. It never does. By the time she realized how deep she was, there was no way out, so she doubled down. Tried to frame Adrian, tried to make herself the hero. And she would have succeeded if not for a duchess who'd learned to throw knives out of boredom. They're offering her a choice, Adrian told Eliza that night. Testify against Dubois and his network, or face execution for treason. What will she choose? She's already talking, giving up names, locations, everything. He looked exhausted. It's over, Eliza. The network is broken. Thorne is being hunted across Europe. Victoria is cooperating. Dubois is in custody. We won. Eliza nodded slowly, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. What happens to us now? She asked. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. That depends. On what? On what you want, from this marriage, from me. He moved closer. I've been thinking about what you said, about partnership, about trust. And you were right. I treated you like an obligation, a contract, something to be managed rather than valued. Adrian, let me finish, please. He took her hands. I married you because I needed a duchess, someone to fulfill a role I didn't expect to. I didn't think I could. He trailed off, struggling for words. Eliza waited, heart hammering. I didn't think I could care about someone again, he said finally. After Victoria, not that Victoria, just the experience of being hurt, being betrayed before, I shut everything down, made myself cold, controlled, safe. And then I threw a wrench into your carefully controlled life. You threw multiple wrenches, and knives, apparently. His smile was small, but genuine. And you made me remember what it feels like to trust someone, to work with someone, to actually want to come home because someone's there worth coming home to. Eliza's throat tightened. That's not love, Adrian. No, not yet. Maybe never in the way poets write about. He squeezed her hands. But it's real. It's honest. And it's more than I thought I'd ever have. So I'm asking, is it enough? Can we build something real from this? Not a perfect love story, but a real partnership? Eliza looked at him. This man who'd been a stranger, then a disappointment, then a distant ally, and now something else, something harder to name. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't know if I can love you. I don't know if you can love me. But I know I don't want to go back to being invisible. You could never be invisible again, not after what you've done. And I know, Eliza continued, that these past weeks, working with you, fighting beside you, actually mattering in your life, that felt right. Like something worth keeping. Then let's keep it, on one condition. Name it. No more secrets, no more locked doors, no more treating me like I'm too fragile for the truth. She met his eyes. If we do this, rebuild this marriage into something real, it has to be as equals. Adrian nodded slowly. Equals. I can do that. Can you? Because that means giving up control. Letting me in. Actually talking to me instead of making decisions alone and then informing me later. It'll be difficult. I'm used to working alone. So am I. We'll both have to learn. She paused. And there's something else. I want to keep the fringe society. Keep building that network. Not just for intelligence work, but for real change. Those women deserve better than what society gives them. Agreed. On one condition of my own. Which is? You teach me to throw knives, because apparently I've been sleeping next to a dangerous woman and didn't even know it. Eliza laughed. Actually laughed. Tension breaking. Deal. They stood there in the study, their study, hands clasped, the beginning of something tentative and real forming between them. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, wasn't love at first sight or passionate romance or any of the things she'd once dreamed of. It was better, because it was real. The summons to court came 3 weeks later, not for trial. Victoria had cooperated enough to avoid that spectacle, but for recognition. The Prince Regent himself wanted to meet the Duchess, who'd helped break a French espionage ring. Eliza dressed carefully. Not too formal, not too modest, just right. She was done dressing to disappear. The presentation hall was packed with nobility. All of London society, it seemed, had turned out to watch. Eliza recognized faces in the crowd, women who'd once dismissed her, men who'd ignored her, the entire structure of judgment and hierarchy that had tried to crush her. Lady Pemberton was there, looking genuinely impressed. Helena gave her an encouraging smile. Even some of the women who'd snubbed her at the beginning of the season watched with something like respect. The Prince Regent was younger than Eliza expected, charming in a practiced way. He greeted Adrian first, then turned to her. Duchess Blackwood, we hear you've been quite busy. Yes, Your Highness. Throwing knives, breaking up spy rings, running intelligence networks through tea parties. His eyes gleamed with amusement. You're not your typical Duchess. No, Your Highness, I'm not. Good. England needs more women like you, women who refuse to be what they're told to be. He gestured, and a servant brought forward a velvet case. In recognition of your service to the crown, we present you with the Order of Merit. The crowd gasped. The Order of Merit was rarely given, never to women. Until now. Eliza accepted the medal, feeling its weight in her palm. This small piece of metal that represented everything she'd fought for. Recognition, respect, proof that she'd mattered. Thank you, Your Highness. Thank your husband, too, for having the wisdom to trust you when everyone else told him not to. The Prince Regent glanced at Adrian. Though I suspect you didn't make it easy for him. No, Eliza agreed. I didn't. After the ceremony, London society descended. Women who'd avoided her now wanted to be her friend. Men who'd dismissed her now sought her opinion. Everyone wanted proximity to the Duchess who'd done the impossible. Eliza handled them all with grace. But inside she felt detached. These weren't her people. They never had been. Her people were the women of the fringe society. The servants at the estate who'd first taught her that loyalty was earned, not commanded. The ordinary people trying to survive in an extraordinary world. That evening, back at the townhouse, Eliza stood in front of the mirror and removed the medal. She set it aside carefully. It was an honor, but it wasn't who she was. Who she was couldn't be captured in medal and ribbon. Regretting the attention, Adrian appeared in the doorway. Regretting that it took throwing knives and catching spies for anyone to notice I existed. They were always going to be slow, traditional, resistant to change. He moved to stand beside her. But you changed them anyway, whether they realize it or not. Did I? Or did I just prove I could play their game better than they could? Both. Which is exactly what makes you dangerous. Adrian's smile was slight. You've shown other women what's possible. That's going to have consequences. Good ones. Eliza looked at their reflections. Duke and Duchess Blackwood. No longer strangers. Not quite lovers. Something in between. Partners, allies. Two people learning to build something real from the ruins of an arrangement. I want to go back to the estate, she said suddenly. Not to hide, just to breathe. Away from London and politics and everyone watching. When? Tomorrow. Is that too soon? No. I think that's exactly right. They left London the next morning. The journey felt different this time. Not a frightened bride traveling toward the unknown, but two people choosing to go home together. The estate looked the same as always, perfectly manicured, imposing. But when they arrived, the servants lined up to greet them. Their faces showed genuine welcome. Mrs. Hendricks stepped forward. Your Graces, welcome home. Home. The words settled over Eliza like warmth. Over the following weeks, they fell into new rhythms. Adrian still had his work, legitimate intelligence work now, sanctioned and supervised. Eliza expanded the Fringe Society's mission, helping women across England connect, support each other, push for small changes in how society treated them. They had dinner together most nights, talked about their days, argued sometimes, laughed occasionally, built something that felt sustainable. One evening, about 2 months after their return, Eliza found Adrian in the gallery, standing in front of that dark, violent landscape painting she'd noticed years ago. You painted this, she said. Not a question. Yes, when I was 20, angry at the world, at myself, at everything I couldn't control. It's beautiful, in a harsh way. I was thinking of painting again, something different this time. He glanced at her. Would you sit for me, as a model? Why? Because I want to try capturing something real, not anger, not control, just honesty. Eliza considered. All right, but I'm not sitting still for hours in some formal pose. What would you prefer? Paint me working. In the study, or with the servants, or doing something that actually matters. Adrian smiled. I can do that. The first painting took 3 weeks. Eliza in the study, surrounded by correspondence and ledgers, managing the estate. When he showed it to her, she barely recognized herself. She looked powerful, competent, real. Is that how you see me? She asked. That's who you are. He painted 3 more over the following months, each one capturing a different aspect. Eliza teaching Jenny to read. Eliza meeting with the Fringe Society. Eliza standing in the gardens looking out at the land she'd helped restore. No perfect Duchess poses. No idealized beauty. just reality, captured honestly. Spring came, then summer. The estate thrived under Eliza's continued management. The fringe society expanded to 12 cities. News came occasionally from London. Thorne had been found in Brussels and would face trial. Dubois had been exchanged in a prisoner swap. Victoria had been relocated to Scotland under supervision. The world moved on. But here, in this estate that had once felt like a prison, Eliza had found something unexpected: purpose, partnership, a life that actually felt worth living. One evening in late summer, she and Adrian walked through the gardens. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber. "I never apologized," Adrian said suddenly, "for that first day, when I brought you here and treated you like a transaction. You apologized several times, in various ways. Not properly. Not for making you feel invisible." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "You were never invisible, Eliza. I was just too controlled to let myself see clearly. And now? Now I see you, all of you, the woman who saved my life, who built her own power base, who refused to disappear no matter how hard the world tried to erase her." Eliza felt emotion tighten her throat. "That's a lot of responsibility, being seen that clearly. You can handle it. You've handled worse." She laughed. "True." They walked on in comfortable silence. Somewhere in the house behind them, servants were preparing dinner. Tomorrow Eliza had meetings with 3 women from nearby estates who wanted to join the Fringe Society. Next week, Adrian was traveling to London for Parliament, and she'd decided to go with him, not as decoration, but as an equal partner. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but promising, full of work and challenges, and the slow, difficult process of building a real marriage from the ashes of an arrangement. It wasn't the life Eliza had imagined as a young girl dreaming of romance and passion and fairy tale endings. It was better, because it was hers, built by her hands, her intelligence, her refusal to accept invisibility as her fate. That night, as she prepared for bed, Eliza caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked different than the frightened girl who'd arrived 3 years ago. Older, yes, but also stronger, more certain. She thought about that girl, the one who'd accepted this marriage because she had no choice, the one who'd been terrified of the cold duke and the empty mansion and the life of silence stretching ahead. If she could go back and tell that girl anything, it would be this: "You're going to survive, more than survive. You're going to build something extraordinary from nothing. You're going to prove everyone wrong, including yourself." A knock at the connecting door between her chamber and Adrian's. She'd stopped locking it months ago. "Come in." Adrian entered, still dressed, but with his cravat loosened. He looked tired, but content. "There's something I want to show you." He led her to his study, their study, and pulled out a folder. Inside were architectural drawings. "What are these?" "Plans. For a new wing on the estate. I was thinking we could add a proper library, meeting rooms for your society, maybe a school for the servants' children." Eliza stared at the drawings. "This is extensive." "We have the money, we have the vision. Why not build something that reflects who we actually are, rather than what tradition says we should be?" "You're serious?" "Completely. Unless you think it's too much?" "No, I think it's perfect." She looked up at him. "When did you become someone who builds schools for servants' children?" "When I married someone who showed me what actually matters." They stood close together, looking at the plans, imagining the future they were building. And for once, that future didn't feel suffocating or predetermined or impossible. It felt like possibility. Later, when Adrian had returned to his own chamber and the house had gone quiet, Eliza sat at the window one last time. Looking out at the grounds she'd transformed, the estate that had been her prison and become her kingdom. She thought about the Pemberton Ball, about standing in the middle of that dance floor, finally breaking under the weight of neglect and humiliation, and making a scene that should have destroyed her. That moment, that crack in her perfect duchess facade, had actually saved her, because it forced her to stop performing and start building. Stop seeking approval and start creating value. Stop being invisible and start being undeniable. The scandal that should have ended her had actually begun her real life. And yes, she'd had to fight for every inch of ground. Had to prove herself again and again. Had to survive espionage and betrayal and attempted murder. But she'd done it on her terms, in her way. The arrangement that was supposed to be a cold transaction had transformed into something neither of them expected. Not passionate romance, but genuine partnership. Not perfect love, but real respect. Not a fairy tale, but something more valuable. A relationship built on trust and equality and the daily choice to see each other clearly. 18 months later, Eliza stood in the same gardens, watching the new wing take shape. The library was nearly complete. The school had its first students. The Fringe Society now spanned 23 cities and had successfully lobbied for 3 legal changes protecting women's property rights. And there, in her arms, was a daughter, 6 months old, born not from duty, but from the slow, surprising transformation of an arrangement into something resembling love. They'd named her Catherine, after no one in particular, because she didn't need to carry anyone's legacy but her own. Adrian approached across the lawn, looking windblown and happy. He'd been writing, something he'd started doing more often, taking breaks from the intensity of his work. "How is she?" he asked, gently touching Catherine's small hand. "Perfect, stubborn, loud, everything I hoped for." "Like her mother, then?" "Exactly like her mother." They stood together in the garden, Duke, Duchess, daughter, and Eliza felt something she'd never expected to feel in this place. Complete, not because she'd found perfect love or achieved some idealized ending, but because she'd taken an impossible situation and forged it into something real, something worth having. The girl who'd been sold into an arrangement with a cold duke had become the woman who changed everything, not by being perfect, but by refusing to disappear. And in the end, that refusal had saved not just her marriage, but her life, her future, herself. She looked down at Catherine, already showing signs of the same stubborn determination that had carried Eliza through the darkest moments. And she made a silent promise. This child would never feel invisible, would never be told she was less than, would never have to fight as hard just to be seen. Because Eliza had fought those battles already, had won them, and had cleared a path for the women who came after. That evening, after Catherine was asleep, Eliza and Adrian sat in their study, not working, just existing together in comfortable silence. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked suddenly. "Marrying me? Coming here?" Eliza considered the question honestly. "I regret how it started. The coldness, the distance, the years of feeling like I didn't matter. But I don't regret where we ended up. This," she gestured around at the study, the estate, the life they'd built. "None of this would exist if I'd married someone who loved me from the start. I would never have had to become this person. Strong enough to survive you?" Adrian laughed. "That's a depressing way to view our marriage." "Is it? I think it's honest." She met his eyes. "We weren't given a love story. We were given an arrangement, and we forged it into something better than love. Partnership, respect, choice. You make it sound like some grand achievement. It is, because we could have stayed cold, distant, lived separate lives under the same roof. Most arranged marriages do." She leaned forward. "We chose differently. Every day we keep choosing differently. That's harder than falling in love, and maybe worth more." Adrian reached across the space between them, took her hand. "I'm glad you refused to disappear. I'm glad you finally learned to see me." They sat like that as night fell over the estate. Two people who'd started as strangers, survived as adversaries, and emerged as partners. Years later, historians studying the era would note the unusual duchess who'd broken espionage rings and built schools, who challenged social norms and created networks of women supporting each other, who transformed an arranged marriage into a genuine partnership. They'd analyze her letters, her achievements, her influence on the women's reform movement that came after. But they'd miss the real story. The story of a girl sold into marriage who refused to accept invisibility, who learned to fight not with weapons or money, but with intelligence and determination and the stubborn refusal to let the world define her worth. The story of a cold duke who learned that control was less valuable than trust. That partnership required vulnerability. That the woman he'd dismissed as an obligation had become the most important person in his life. The story of an arrangement that became something real, not through magic or fate or destiny, but through daily choice, through respect earned and trust built. Through two people deciding that what they'd been given wasn't good enough, and choosing to create something better. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than a fairy tale, because it was true.